You're live.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. It's the Brookline School Committee, February 17th, 2022. Welcome. It's good to see everybody. And we have lots of guest speakers for public comment tonight. So we're just going to get started. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda? Thank you, Stephen. I'm looking for my sheet. And do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Helen. Any comments before we vote? Okay, we'll vote. David?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
Val?
Yes.
Is Mariah here? Oh, no, Mariah's late. She told me that. Sorry. So sorry, my fault. Andy?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Thank you. We're going to the superintendent's report. So Dr. Guillory.
All right, good evening, everyone. So great to see all of you and be with you this evening. We're going to jump right in because as our chair has said, we have a pretty full agenda. So tonight, the agenda will do a quick update on school visits, look at some community engagement activities, share an awesome award that one of our faculty members has received, give an update on our COVID-19, where we stand there, then look at a language piece for our 22 and 23 calendars that were adopted, and then certainly share the excitement of our spotlight on excellence. So with our recently completed school visits, superintendent visits, I had the opportunity to visit Ridley, Baker, and Runkle. And each of these we'll talk a little bit more about later, but essentially at this moment, a point in time, continuing to conduct class visits with building principals, check in on what our students are engaged in, and had the awesome opportunity to be at Ridley on day 100 as well as Valentine's Day, and enjoyed my visit at Baker this week, and then my visit with Runkle this morning to do some classroom visits in the middle school and upper elementary. And on deck are my visits to Lawrence, Lincoln, and Pierce. So the first 100 days of school, as I shared Monday, February 14th, marked the 100th day for this school year. And here are some of the ways that classrooms celebrated across the district. So there were numerous manipulatives that were being utilized. So here at Pierce, Ms. Harrell's first grade class showcased the different ways they can arrange blocks of 100. At Ridley, Mr. Lipton's second grade class recalls 100 memorable moments in their year thus far. Ridley also had a number of different ways that students were writing math equations that equaled 100 as well. And then at Heath, Ms. Kuchar's kindergarten class were making necklaces with 100 beads. So again, lots of excitement around, and many students dressed up as 100-year-old individuals. So I saw lots of canes and gray hair also as we made our way around the building. There are a number of athletic highlights that we also want to share with you regarding BHS and their busy season. So while winter sports is slowly wrapping up, many of our Brookline Warriors have enjoyed their fair share of championships this season. So the first image we have is our wrestling team winning the MIAA Division I Central Metro Sectional Championship. We have the image in the center is our cheerleading group competing in the Bay State Conference. And then our last image there is our boys swim team taking the MIAA South Sectional 200 Free Relay Championship. So congratulations to all of those teams and to our BHS community for your continued hard work. Black History Month, we're certainly midstream now in this month. February is denoted nationally to celebrate the achievements and history of African Americans and remind ourselves to integrate this history as part of American or US history in that regard. And so I had the opportunity to speak with an enthusiastic group of fifth graders at Baker yesterday to share my personal journey and walk through some of the artifacts that we've managed to keep over the years. And those artifacts go back as far as kindergarten. I was able to share with the group my kindergarten report card as well as kindergarten diploma and marched all the way up through high school, showing, doing a picture story of my life and, and work. And I tell you, you can see the hands raised in the audience there. And when I left Baker, I was truly amazed, inspired, and exhausted all at the same time. The students were asking such great questions there, and I look forward to all of my interactions with students. The second image there is at Runkle, Ms. Voros, the second grade classroom, decorated their doors with author profiles. And then we shared with you, I think last time, that we were coming up to the event at Golden Temple, the recruiting event. And there you see Janae Utaro and Malcolm Carthorne introducing the public schools of Brookline to candidates of color that are interested in joining our team. So again, very exciting happenings this month. We want to also take the mic back to Baker and say congratulations to Mrs. Richardson. She is the first grade teacher there at Baker and being named one of just 2 Massachusetts recipients of the Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching. Mrs. Richardson learned of this award this week, and Principal Lewis is sharing this information with the Baker community, and we look forward to having Mrs. Richardson at one of our upcoming spotlights on excellence. And so there's Ms. Richardson with her group on the 100th day of school. COVID-19, this is certainly on all of our minds as there have been a number of changes impacting the state here. So we recognize that the commissioner and the governor have removed or allowing the mask mandate to expire February 28th. And at this time, the public health department here in Brookline has instituted or has stipulated that masks will continue to remain in place in all town and school buildings as of now. And so as a committee, we will be picking up the discussion at our March 3rd meeting, and we know that there are a number of certainly opinions and folks with input on this. We certainly want to hear, continue the discussions with our Panel 4 group, as well as the information that I continue gathering from our internal stakeholders, as well as our parents and community about this. So more to come, but we're certainly recognize the need to pick up this conversation. And we have a number of meetings between now and then, and we'll take the opportunity to have those discussions then. We are also updating, looking at updating our communications. And so this is a draft mock-up, not the final page, but we're going to update sort of FAQs around, certainly around COVID. The information is ever evolving and ever changing. So we're going to make sure that we have our centralized hub updated so that the most up-to-date information is there on our website. As far as our calendar goes, Betsy, we can jump to the next slide. We've adopted our 22 and 23, 22, 23, and 23, 24 calendars, but I did want to bring back to the committee one line that we typically include on our calendars is for the consultation of the BEEP schedule regarding important dates and dismissal for early childhood conferences. So I want to alert the committee that you adopted the calendars that did not have that line on it. And we want to add that to our publicized calendars. And with that, we move to our spotlight on excellence. So tonight, We are visiting with Lincoln School, or Lincoln School is visiting with us. And the question is, what do tiny houses and word blocks have in common at Lincoln School? They are both 3D projects happening right now in the middle school. This is a true collaboration between students and teachers across the district that stem from curiosity and a desire to learn. 3D printing and design opens new pathways for learning at Lincoln School and fosters hands-on learning and creative problem solving. We're so pleased to have Lincoln teachers and students with us this evening so they can share some examples of this work. I am pleased to turn the microphone over to Principal Denizio to take us through this exciting opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Guillory and the school committee for having us here tonight. I just want to say a couple of words to introduce the students and staff that are here with us. And so, because they are truly the experts on the work that we're going to be sharing with you tonight. But I wanted to say up front that this is a true example of collaborative work, both between our staff as well as staff at other schools, and work that's been supported by the BEF and also a Lincoln parent. So in addition to it being just really interesting and exciting work, and it's an example of a lot of really great minds coming together to make an enriching experience for students. I want to say too that this really highlights the incredible work and creativity of Anne-Marie, our ETS, our EdTech specialist, and she, probably like so many of the ETS in the district, have been the real all-stars of the remote and hybrid experience. And in addition to that support to students and staff over the last year and a half, also is capable of bringing these kinds of hands-on and interdisciplinary projects to life. So just a huge thank you to Anne-Marie and all the different hats that she wears. And so now actually I'm gonna hopefully I think I can share my screen, Robin, and turn things over to Anne-Marie and Jody Waldesbuhl, who are here, along with a couple of our Lincoln students who are going to talk about the work they've been doing. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you for having us. Okay. Great. So like Brian said, it's been a total collaboration. It started, this journey started, oh, next slide, Brian. It started in 2018. I was approached by Miss Toshko Fell. She's an EL teacher at Lincoln to write a grant for a 3D printer. So we immediately reached out to the expert Jesse Kerdehay at the Driscoll School to see what he recommended. So we did everything he told us to do. We wrote the grant and the BEF gave us that grant, awarded us the grant, and we were really, really grateful. Unfortunately, it kind of took a pause on us because of COVID. But that's okay. So we hung in there and we got another printer donated during that time by a generous Lincoln family. So we were thrilled. Next slide, please. So one of my goals at the end of last year was to use those 3D printers this year in 6th grade. And this is the first project that I've done with 6th grade. So as you can see, we have some word blocks up here. I get to teach 6th grade weekly. And in that class, kids learn new technology skills and apply them to their core subjects. So right now they're learning to use Tinkercad, which is a 3D web-based software that they can use to create things like this. And then we print them out on those awesome printers we got. So every 6th grader will make one of these blocks and they'll be connected and displayed in the library. But the best part was I got to preview these lessons with a small group of students that helped me tremendously because they would give me feedback and then I would change the lesson so that it would be better for everybody. So I'm not sure if Willie's here, but he was one of the leaders of that small group. And there's his block right there. So I don't know if he's here yet.
Hi, Ms. Nazarski.
Oh, hi. Hi. Yep, so Willie was our leader.
Hi.
Hi. And and the blocks might look really simple, but actually they're pretty complicated, as the kids would tell you. They have to add connectors. They had to learn how to align objects, move objects, group objects, import files, export files. They're the true experts of this, and I'm learning along with them. I'm actually I'm a beginner. So it's been a really amazing experience. So what we're doing next, this linking to that, so kids they're learning how to use Tinkercad to build the word block in order to get to a more complex project, which is building a cell model. So in 6th grade, I worked with Miss Traub years ago on a different project with on the cell structure unit, and it was the kids loved it. It was in Minecraft, but we don't have Minecraft anymore. So this is the replacement for that, and I'm sure everybody is really looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun, and they're learning a ton. So with that, you can go to the next slide. And this is just a picture of 2 students watching something print, which is mesmerizing. It's kind of like watching a Roomba around your house. The printers are right outside my office and right outside of Miss W's office. And then we have the little printer that is on a cart, so that can be wheeled around to different rooms in the school. Next slide, please. And these are the true stars. These guys are showing their work, their word blocks, and Emily's showing her heart that she made. So Willie, if you don't mind, can you tell us, what do you think you'll remember about this project? Willie.
Can you say it again, please? Because I'm lagging.
Oh, I'm sorry. What do you think you'll remember about this project?
I think I'll remember how hard it was, because you had to make sure like all the little parts were touching each other, and it wasn't like you couldn't just like have it like auto connect to it. You actually had to move it all by yourself.
How did it feel when you held the first thing you printed?
It felt really good because it felt like I accomplished something.
Emily, can you tell us, thank you, Willie. Emily, can you tell us what you like about 3D printing and design?
What I like the most about 3D printing and design is that you can actually hold something that you designed. It's not like drawing where you just like design it and that's it. You can hold a 3D object that you created.
It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
We're blown away every day by the stuff we're making. Next slide, please. Okay, and now Miss Wildesbuhl is here, and she's going to tell you how she's using the 3D printer and how we collaborated on tiny houses. Miss W.
There we go. So thank you for having us.
Oh, sorry.
And I'm here tonight with one of my students, Koha Tanaka, who very kindly agreed to come forth and speak on our collaboration with Anne-Marie. And we've been very fortunate. I'm actually positioned next to Anne-Marie in the school. So I've been looking at these 3D printers, mesmerized as well with the Roomba experience, and just how something becomes so hands-on that was in your head. And so in a process of talking about, I'm an EL teacher. And so I'm always looking for ways to work with the reading or the language that we're using to make it very meaningful, and try to integrate projects that are really hands-on and that are authentic in how we use the language, and allow a great deal of opportunities for our students to use language between each other, and as well as practice more complex forms for our more advanced students, which they might not get a chance to do, as well as provide access and equity for our beginner students who are often struggling to access curriculum and participate meaningfully in their experience at school. So when I was working on a book on tiny houses, Ms. Mazaki overheard me and said, oh, I think instead of just doing it on paper, normally I build it on paper and then we build models out of foam or cardboard. She said, I think we can use these printers. And so working together, we were able to integrate and collaborate on this unit and integrate the technology into what you're going to see next that the kids have been doing. So if you can change to the next slide. So what you see here, we began by reading our books and a number of different informational texts at different levels. We have beginner students with advanced students. This is grades 6 through 8, an EL class. And in the process of doing that, we then moved to a paper form where we talked about moving things around. For our beginner students, we were able to teach a lot of vocabulary for the different items that you might find in the house and some more simple grammatical structures. And later on, you'll see some of the more advanced structures that the students used. They were also able to really help each other and collaborate together to produce something. So here you see these two students beginning to create in Tinkercad, which has a big learning curve for me, as well. As Anne-Marie has said, the students really pick up on this a lot faster than certainly I am able to do. So, and I've spent inordinate amounts of time that I did not anticipate trying to keep up with them at night, so that when I came back in the next day, I wasn't holding them back. So if we go to the next slide, after we produce these, this is our end result. So our tiny houses, we had some parameters within which they had to work in terms of spacing and limitations and levels, and looking at functionality for them. So these are this is one item from a student, 2 different views, and how he chooses to position the furniture. And there's really a lot of thought that I never thought would have to go into producing something like this. It really works on a lot of process skills, anticipation. When you're working with industrial design like this, things have to happen in a certain order. You have to accept a lot of failure and reroute your thinking and to move forward. And so if you go to the next slide. Thank you. So I'm not going to read this, but this was kind of the structure within which I was working. As we move forward, we are working on pros and cons of tiny houses, energy efficiency, and different reasons to do things and make choices. They'll be writing a pro and con essay as well. And then we are going to be exhibiting these tiny houses, and they'll be using their oral language as well as the written work that they've done to present to other students within the school. And this really, really works well for English learners. As I've mentioned, it's extremely accessible, so it provides them with the ability to really engage regardless of language level and drive forward independently in their work. It works very easily to differentiate within their levels of language. The program itself allows them to change the print language. So, if I have a student who doesn't speak English, they're able to change all the text within the program and tabs to Japanese or Chinese or whatever language they need. But also it really does not require any literacy in terms of the traditional way we would expect students to be able to have to read to function and achieve, because all of the icons, everything's icons are symbols. So you actually don't even need to read tabs in a language or have those literacy skills to be successful. You click on symbols to make things work. And so it really has been a great project. I'm so thankful that I was able to do this with Anne-Marie, and one of my students is here, Koha. So I was hoping, if he's comfortable, Koha, could you just tell us a little bit about, what you've enjoyed most about this project and what was hardest maybe for you?
Yeah, my name is Koha, and the most enjoyable thing is to make like the thing like super specifically. For example, like I made oven with like little fan and apart body, and like, or like refrigerator with like some door with them. And this is a kind of super enjoyable and fun thing. And like imagine it when the print is finished. Like it's kind of like I imagine, and like, you know, it's so I can say like exciting to see that. And the hardest thing is to like to change the height of thing is the one of the most highest thing to make the house. Yeah.
Thank you, Koha. We appreciate you being here tonight and sharing that. I know it's not always easy to come forward and talk in front of a lot of people. So thank you for being here. And I think we can go to the next slide, Brian. I think we're at the end. So here we have some, I'll move very quickly because I know time is of the essence, some very simple language structures. So for our my beginning students, we were working on more simple sentences in their writing and in their speaking. So more descriptive language as well as expressing their choices. And then if we go, there's a lot of grammar in here that takes me a while to go through. And then here for our more advanced students in their writing, we're looking at more complex phrasing and structures that they'll be able to transfer to other content classes and academic writing. So thank you. Take the next slide. There we go.
That is amazing. I love seeing the 3D. My goodness, that's amazing, amazing. Any questions or comments? Yeah, Jennifer.
This is such a cool project. It's such a nice integration. I'm so excited to hear from the students who came tonight. You could just hear how excited and proud they were of their projects and the work that they were doing and how engaging it is. So that's just awesome. It was just, this is my favorite part of our meetings. I love when the kids come and talk to us. So thank you to all the adults who are supporting them in that great work. And thanks to all the students who came. I know it can be a lot to come and speak in front of a large group of people, but you can just, it was great to hear how excited you are about this work. It's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Helen?
I want to echo Jennifer's words, but also I'm really impressed how the cross collaboration between schools happened also. You know, thank you, teachers, for doing that and for thinking about that, you know, not sort of limiting yourself just to your school, but using whatever expertise we have within the system. So this is great. I just hope we can continue.
Anne-Marie, are there 3D printers in most of the schools? Do you know?
I believe in most of the schools there are.
Yeah, some of them have in makerspace and the makerspace rooms, right? Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. We are going to move on because we have more students we're going to hear from, but not on projects, but on public comment. They have been signing up. So I always say you're welcome to stay as long as you want, but you're certainly welcome to leave and enjoy the rest of your evening. And thank you.
Madam Chair, before you transition, I just wanted to acknowledge.
Oh, that's right. Sure. Sorry, Dr. Guillory.
So the Public Schools of Brookline Spotlight on Excellence is awarded to Anne-Marie Mazaki, Jody Walderspool, and Lincoln School's 6th grade teachers and students for enthusiastically embracing the 3D printing technology and fostering academic curiosity, hands-on learning, and creative problem solving amongst the 6th grade students. So here is our Spotlight on Excellence Award tonight for all of you. So thank you all again for a job well done and for sharing your experience with us.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
I would comment too on Dr. Guillory's, your presentation to the 5th graders. I had the honor of hearing some of your background at a presentation you did, and it is worth hearing where you came from and how you got to here. So anyone who has the opportunity should ask Dr. Guillory about his early childhood and then coming all the way and how he ended up in Boston. So, and in Brookline. So that it's a good story, Dr. Guillory. So thank you for sharing that. We are going to move to public comment. We have a number of people who have signed up, which is good. But just remember, please keep it to 2 minutes so we have time to hear everybody. So the first up is Ezra Kleinbaum and then Sheriff Fisher after that.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, Ezra, go right ahead.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Ezra Kleinbaum. I'm a freshman at Brookline High School and a graduate of Pierce. I'm going to quickly go over why it's important that the district move towards more plant-based school cafeterias. If you'd like to hear a more in-depth explanation, please read my full remarks, which should have been sent to all committee members. There are things every single one of us does that contributes to global warming. However, it is possible, practical, and incredibly important that we all try to reduce our environmental impact, especially for things that we do on a regular basis. Things like commuting to work or school, using electricity, and eating. Not many people consider the environmental impact of something they hopefully do at least 3 times a day, that is, eating. Researchers at Oxford University and the Swiss Agricultural Research Institute found that the more plant-based one's diet is, the more sustainable their diet is. Specifically, plant-based diets reduce food's emissions by up to 73% depending on where you live. Not only does a plant-based diet reduce greenhouse gas emissions from food, but it also reduces emissions of toxic runoff from food production. If everyone were to eat plant-based diets, freshwater withdrawals would be reduced to 75% of what they currently are, and we would require a whopping 3.1 billion hectares less farmland, or approximately 12 million square miles, an area nearly twice the size of Russia, which could be converted from farmland to natural habitats and forests. The United Nations even states that animal agriculture is responsible for 14.5% of all human-made greenhouse gas emissions. That is why I've worked with school committee members, town meeting members, and student legislators, and have drafted a suggested addition to the sustainability policy, which goes as follows. The district will promote sustainable agriculture and sustainable eating by moving away from unsustainable foods, including but not limited to meat, poultry, and fish. The district will instead move towards and promote plant-based food options. I'd like to add that while I support healthy food and limited additives to improve the health of the food being served, the suggested addition from the subcommittee meeting with regards to minimally processed foods doesn't seem like it belongs in the sustainability policy, or at the very least, it doesn't belong in that paragraph of the sustainability policy. Perhaps it belongs in a wellness policy instead. The way the phrase minimally processed was proposed to be incorporated into this paragraph makes it seem like we are moving away from meat-based foods and towards minimally processed plant-based foods, which would mean that the plant-based food is minimally processed while the meat-based food is more processed. That would exclude many healthy plant-based foods that kids enjoy eating, such as veggie burgers and other meat substitutes, as well as things like pizza and mac and cheese that students would be excited about. I don't want to see something as important as moving towards more sustainable, more plant-based cafeterias fail because there isn't enough demand for the plant-based food. The phrase minimally processed is also very broad. Even healthy foods such as tofu are considered processed. It is certainly important that students learn healthy eating habits, including eating less processed foods, but that seems to me like it should be part of a wellness policy instead of a sustainability policy. By moving away from meat, poultry, and fish in school cafeterias, we can drastically reduce the environmental impact our district has, and we can teach students sustainable eating habits that they can continue to use and spread throughout their entire lives. Our futures, my future, and the future of every living being on this planet is at risk. Please make the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Ezra. Sherry, you're up, and then Minna Schweitzer Shallot will be after that.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can, Sherry, go right ahead.
Great, thanks to Ezra for bringing this fantastic recommendation for improving the sustainability in our cafeterias. I'm Shira Fisher, a town meeting member from Precinct 11. I'm a Brookline High graduate and I have elementary school aged kids. I'm impressed by the way Ezra is leading us to take our values and move them into concrete actions and plans. As someone who personally prefers not to eat meat, I seek out tasty vegetarian options when I'm searching for my own meals. But as Ezra pointed out, the stakes are much higher. By moving away from unsustainable foods in school cafeterias, we are reducing our environmental impact as a district, as a town. Furthermore, as Ezra said, we're teaching students sustainable eating habits. As Ezra notes in his written comments, the shift away from unsustainable foods is a shift that is already happening. Major school districts across the country, including Los Angeles, New York City, and Baltimore, don't serve any meat in their cafeterias on Mondays. New York City recently went as far as to start serving only completely plant-based meals on Fridays, in addition to their already meatless Mondays, and have fully plant-based options available every day. Other districts across the country are doing the same. So over the last few months, Ezra has worked with both the Environmental Action and Food Justice Club and the Club Warriors for Animal Rights at Brookline High, and they worked with Sasha Palmer, who is Director of Food Services at PSB. Together, they determined that the first Monday after February vacation, in less than 2 weeks, Meatless Mondays will begin at all the public schools of Brookline. This is a huge and amazing step towards more sustainable school cafeterias. I'm very proud of it on behalf of Ezra and Brookline as a whole, and I'm grateful to Sasha Palmer for helping to make that possible. But these Meatless Mondays are simply based on how she plans the menu for each week, which is ultimately up to one person and could easily be changed in the future. No one person should control how sustainable our cafeterias are. Sustainability should be something that is institutionalized and required, which is why it is necessary that the district add the line, Ezra mentioned earlier, to the sustainability policy. Eating is fundamental to human life. Just like we make sure the way we commute to work and heat our houses is as sustainable as we can, we need to make sure that the way we eat is sustainable. And meat, poultry, and fish are less sustainable than plant-based foods. So we really appreciate that you are considering sustainability as a whole for the Brookline school system, and that the food choices offered in the cafeteria can play a key role in moving us in the right direction towards a healthier planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Shira. Minna, you are up next, and then Calvin Bogart.
Can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Good evening. My name is Minna Switzer-Shallon. I'm a 5th grader at Pierce School, and I eat lunch in the cafeteria at Pierce every day. I'm here to support food sustainability in our school cafeterias across Brookline. The cafeteria should serve more food made from plants instead of animals, because there are lots of students who are vegetarians in our Brookline schools, and they need food that they can eat. Also, vegetarian options take less energy to grow and are better for the environment. We need to take care of the environment because climate change is slowly weakening our atmosphere, and if we don't do something, our planet will be damaged. The cafeterias already serve vegetarian options such as pancakes, grilled cheese and tomato soup, and French toast. And we always have salads as a choice. The kids like the vegetarian meals, including me. We can always add more vegetarian options that are delicious. So please support more plant-based meal options in our school cafeterias to help our environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Minna. Calvin, you are up, and then Jonah Bluewolf.
Excuse me, Calvin, there's an issue with your Zoom. I don't know if you want to try from another account, and then we can come back to you.
Okay, I'll come back to you, Calvin. So see if you can figure it out, and we'll come back. We have several more people, so you have time. Jonah, you're up, and then Jerry Yang.
Hey, can y'all hear me?
We can. Go right ahead, Jonah.
Okay. Hello, my name is Jonah Bluewolf. I'm 13 years old in 8th grade at the Driscoll School and a lifelong vegetarian. I'm a vegetarian because a vegetarian diet is more environmentally sustainable, and I want to reduce animal suffering. I'd like to have more vegetarian options at the school cafeteria because it's more inclusive to all religions and non-meat eaters. For example, one day my sister decided to eat a cafeteria lunch because it was a meatless Monday. There were going to be sausage patties on the menu, and my sister assumed that it was going to be fake meat, but in reality, there were pork sausages, which is very sad for a Jewish vegetarian. At school, I have learned that the meat industry contributes significantly to global warming, and I'd like our schools to help do their part in reducing carbon emissions overall and in the cafeterias. I usually eat school lunch because if I don't, I have to make my lunch myself. So every day when I arrive at the cafeteria, I always hope to find an attractive vegetarian option. But sometimes there isn't an option that is readily available, and I have to remember to ask the staff for vegetarian options. The other day, my sister, who was also a vegetarian, forgot to ask for a vegetarian option and ended up pretty much not eating lunch. Thank you for considering this issue.
Thank you, Jonah, for your words. Jerry, you are up, and then Hannah Seleni.
All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you all for having me here today. My name is Jerry Yang, and I am a junior at Brooklyn High School and a student legislature representative. I believe it is incredibly important that we shift to a more plant-based food in school cafeterias across Brookline. After recently learning about the various facts regarding climate change and carbon emissions in biology class, I became aware that our cafeterias are serving a large number of unsustainable foods. On a daily basis, trays after trays of chicken, fish, and beef are served to students. For example, yesterday's school lunch includes a large portion of roasted beef. I personally like the dish. However, my friends and I chose to each take a serving of pasta because we are aware of the environmental impact even a single serving of beef can bring. In fact, one serving of beef has about 20 grams of protein, and according to a recent research done by Oxford, the amount of greenhouse gas released just to prepare the single serving of beef is about 5 kilograms of CO2 equivalents. To put that into perspective, you produce about the same quantity of CO2 when you burn 2 liters of petrol. Don't get me wrong, I still believe meat should be a part of the meal. However, it's important to promote more sustainable food consumption and lower the amount of unsustainable food served in school cafeterias. This is to support a healthy environment for the present and future generations, to improve student health, and progress for environmental restoration. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Jerry. Hannah, you are up next, and then Faith Kramer.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hannah, go right ahead.
Good evening. My name is Hannah Salini. I'm a current 9th grader at BHS. Sustainability is extremely important, especially now. Moving away from meat consumption in cafeterias is a really good way to be more sustainable. And it also provides an opportunity to educate students on the importance and need of sustainability today. We know that the meat industry contributes significantly to increases in greenhouse gas emissions, deforestation, water stress, and more. And as the climate crisis continues to grow and affect us, educating our community and moving away from meat consumption can help us teach younger generations about the importance of sustainability and conserving our planet. Additionally, reducing meat consumption holds other benefits as well, such as improving our health and eating meals that have more of a cruelty-free past. In conclusion, decreasing meat consumption in school cafeterias is a step towards a more sustainable community and future. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Faith, you are up, and then Jonah German.
Hi, my name is Faith. I'm 11 years old and I go to language school. At school, with all my teachers wearing a mask, I can't tell how they are feeling, so I always think they are mad at me. Same goes for my classmates. It's easier for me to read lips so that with my hearing problem, I can understand what I should and how I should do my work at school. I also think that science lunch is the worst because the lunch monitor yells at us all the time. March 16th will be 2 years. Please let us take the mask off. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Faith. Jonah, you're up, and then Amy Lindenboim.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Jonah, go right ahead.
Hi, my name is Jonah German. I'm a freshman at Brookline High School, and I am speaking to you tonight to urge you, as Ezra said, to consider moving towards more meatless options in the cafeteria. And in 8th grade, I went to Pierce in 8th grade science class at Pierce. We learned about something in biology called the 10% rule, otherwise known as trophic inefficiency, which means that with everything that somebody eats, only 10% of the calories in that food will move on to them. So pretty much what that means is that, let's say a cow eats 1,000 calories, and then you have a burger, you only get 100 of those calories. So that makes it much more sustainable to eat plants, because plants conserve that energy and they don't need to be taking from the environment in order to get that. And then when humans eat it, then they will get the full nutrition from that. So that's why it is incredibly unsustainable to continue to eat meat at the rate that we are right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonah. Amy, you are up, and then we'll try Calvin again. So we'll see.
Hi, Amy Lindenboim. I'm the parent of kids who attend Lincoln School and a town meeting member from Precinct 5. For religious reasons, my children don't eat meat at school. And as an earlier speaker mentioned, the availability of palatable, balanced vegetarian meals at school does not seem to be reliable right now. And this directly reduces student participation in the school lunch program, which is not financially sustainable for the program. I also appreciate the select board's support for finding ways to make food services more environmentally sustainable. However, I would suggest revising the phrase in the proposed policy statement that says moving away from unsustainable foods, including but not limited to meat, poultry, and fish. Removing the latter part of this phrase still leaves you with a statement that's really supportive of a plant-based food offerings without kind of painting all meat and poultry and fish with the same brush, even though in reality, due to financial constraints, a lot of what school lunch is getting is unsustainable. Anyway, well, I prefer that school lunches here be mostly or even entirely vegetarian. I think that blanket statement is just a little off. And I think the biggest thing I just wanted to say is that this is the first step, but it's kind of a small step. And I realize there are so many challenges facing it. And I really hope that the school committee and local schools and parents will work together to try to expand the menu and make it more sustainable and not rely entirely on food services to carry that burden. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Is Calvin available? Calvin, did you get this worked out?
No, I'm sorry, Calvin.
Okay, well, Calvin, you could, if you can't get in, you can certainly send us your thoughts in an email if you wish, so that we can read what it is you wanted to present. And we have one more, Natalie Tulipani. Natalie, are you here?
I'm sorry, again, I'm having an issue with allowing her to speak with the Zoom.
Okay, so Natalie, we can't bring you forward again. If you want to send us your thoughts by email, that would be great. You could send them to Robin Coyne if you wish, and she will make sure we all get them. We will get your thoughts. And Elon is not here, right, Robin? Or less?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, so that's all our speakers for public comment. I know Sasha Palmer is here, but I don't know, Sasha, you're going to speak later, if you are not speaking, or if you'd like to just say a few words. Sasha's our food director and does a fabulous job for us, but it's up to you, Sasha. I don't want to put you on the spot, although I just did.
All right, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I came on because I'm very supportive of, I know I've spoken to Ezra and his team. They've done research, they've engaged myself and the assistant director in assisting them in getting more meatless option on the menu. We have been planning, or we are planning to introduce Meatless Monday immediately after the break for our second part of our 7-week cycle, so that we can get an understanding of how that will be accepted by other students. Because I know the district has tried Meatless Monday before, participation seemed to be an issue. So we'll use this opportunity to engage students, put forward, Ezra and his team put forward some great menu ideas. Our staff, our food service managers, or food service workers have been in training with Project Bread's Chef in School, learning how to prepare some of those menu items. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how our first round, or my first round of Meatless Monday in Brookline goes.
Thank you very much, Sasha. Stephen, do you have a question?
Just a quick question. I remember we discussed this, I don't know, 6 to 9 months ago, but Sasha, do you have any up-to-date information about the current demand for vegetarian and vegan options at the schools? Like roughly what proportion of students who eat cafeteria food are asking for vegetarian meals? Right, I feel like you commented on this last time also.
I don't have a specific number in percentage, but we have been getting a lot of an increased interest in vegetarian options. So I know the number has increased since I've been there. We've gotten requests for not just meatless, but also other specialized menu items as well.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I just say thank you to Ezra for bringing this forward and for actually doing a good job of or getting people to come and speak. That's not easy. So thank you. It's good to hear from the students and what they are thinking. So thank you, and thank you, Sasha. We're now going to our school committee action, and we are starting with policy. David, you want to take over?
Yes, so the policy subcommittee last convened this past Monday, where we talked about the sustainability policy, which we heard a lot of public comments on that just a moment ago. And we also further discussed the pesticide policy that we had referred to the full school committee. There are some very minor modifications that have been made to the policy, and you should all have copies of it. We eliminated the economically unfeasible language that appeared in 2 places in the prior draft. And we also added a line at the very end that reads, for pesticide restrictions related to food consumption, please refer to the wellness policy on A18. This was a nod to Mariah's comment at a prior meeting that she had interest in us addressing the pesticide content in foods. The policy subcommittee discussed whether to incorporate that substantively in the pesticide policy or somewhere else. And the discussion led us to the conclusion that addressing food issues with pesticide content would be better placed in the wellness policy, which addresses food consumption overall in extensive detail. And my recollection, Mariah, is that you wanted at minimum us to reference where that information could be found. So we've added that line to this draft. I reached out again to Erin Galentine of the DPW for her input. She told me that there was a multi-departmental meeting regarding this draft, but that she was still waiting to hear back from some of the departments, including the health department. So I don't have any new information on that front.
Comments or question? Are you suggesting, David, that we hold off on a vote or until we hear from them, or no?
I think it depends how, I'd like to hear from other committee members on that. Because on the one hand, I'm not sure that we're ever going to hear back from everyone in timely fashion, unfortunately. So I don't know whether we want to keep holding off because we've already done that twice.
Yeah, I know we have, yeah. Helen?
You're on mute, Helen.
Sorry, thank you. I'm curious, in your discussions, part of this policy directs another department outside the school department in terms of what they can or cannot do. I know there are grounds, but they're the ones who take care of them. And can we do that legally?
I would think that if it's school grounds, we do have control on what happens on school property. And there are some exceptions that are built into this policy. So if it's an emergency situation, pesticides can be used. And that does allow, at least I believe, sufficient wiggle room. I have not heard any opposition from other departments about that aspect of our policy. They seem perfectly fine with us having a pesticide policy. It's more the particulars that I was hoping to get some more detailed feedback on. A few weeks ago, I did get a substantive response from Matt Gillis, who indicated that we are not using 2,4-D anyway, and he didn't anticipate that as a problem, but that glyphosate is sometimes used on poison ivy. However, he was of the belief that there were other options that could be explored for that.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments, thoughts? Stephen.
I just want to say that I'm voting yes on both of these if they come up for a vote anyway, but I did agree with Amy Lindboehm's suggestion that we didn't need to add the final clause of the sentence of what unsustainable foods we should be moving away from. I think that sentence is strong enough as it is without the examples. But if I'm the lone voice here, I don't feel this terribly strongly.
Why don't we hold that, Stephen, until we get to that? Let's do.
Oh,
one
sorry, I thought we were
policy.
commenting on both.
No, I'm sorry. I don't know. Right now, I think we're just doing the one, if that's okay.
Apologies.
No, that's okay. David, do you want to move this?
I do. I feel comfortable moving at this time. So I move that we adopt the pesticide policy, the draft that was included in the file.
Do I have a second? Andy, second? Thank you very much. Any other conversation before we vote? Susan?
Yeah, I think the only question I would have is, if we get a different response back. I mean, I'm just mindful that DPW.
All right, sorry, I'm having trouble with my earbud. I'm just mindful that DPW has been so, I won't say underwater, but under snow for the last number of weeks. And they've been short-staffed and just working crews like 30 hours at a time. So I'm mindful that, they're under a lot of pressure. So I appreciate that they didn't get back to us. And I appreciate that we've already held this off a couple of times. So I understand why we wouldn't want to delay it again. I guess I'm just sort of more asking the committee, if we do get information back, what will we do with it? Are we open to discussing it? What's going to happen when they do answer, David? Get back to you. It's more of a process question.
I think if they come back to us with some kind of major objection to a certain point, we could revisit the policy and amend it accordingly. We've done that before with other policies, including this year. So I'm certainly happy to put anything back on the agenda that needs revision.
Okay, I think that makes sense. I feel so bad for the DPW people right now, but I know we've tried a couple times on this, so thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have one other question. As I'm looking at this and thinking about contractors, does this also apply to rodent control, for instance?
It does, yes.
So are there pesticide-free ways to get rid of rodents? I mean, I don't want to have rats in the schools, you know, because of this policy that no contractor will come in and take care of it.
Well, this is not an explicit ban on all pesticides. It's just saying that there should be use of the least toxic, minimum risk pest control measures.
Okay.
And Matt Gillis did not seem to express concern over that.
It's not a common problem that we have, but occasionally, especially when we do projects, we do have that problem. That's why I'm.
Number 3, Helen, in the first section says basically that only toxic pesticide use presents as a viable option to decrease the pest population.
Okay, I'm good then. Thank you.
I mean, we really would like to not use, you know, toxic pesticides even on rats, even though we don't like them, if it's at all possible, because that means they're there, you know, for animals to see them. The dogs could go after them. I mean, it goes into the ground. So if we can avoid that, I think we want to.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comment before we vote? Okay, let's make it happen. David?
Yes.
Stephen? Susan? Getting a lot of Helen.
Yes.
Thank you. Val?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes, and thank you, David, for adapting the document.
Yeah. Andy?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Thank you, David. Thank you to the policy team. I know you've spent time on this. Did you want to move into the sustainability policy?
Yes, so Stephen, I guess I'll go back to you. Essentially what we discussed at the policy subcommittee was really that clause and the formulation that we wanted to go with. Now, I had initially proposed during that meeting what you just did about removing the portion of the sentence around including not limited to meat, poultry, and fish. Some other subcommittee members felt that we should have that explicitly mentioned. So there was a little bit of a difference there of opinion, but it didn't appear to me that anyone felt particularly strong, at least from the subcommittee. If other subcommittee members feel differently, can certainly speak up.
I guess I would just say that my rationale would be that ideally this policy would last us for some time, and what is sustainable and what is unsustainable will likely change. So it doesn't seem necessary or even appropriate to me to specify what foods are unsustainable at the present moment. And since the goal is sustainability, not vegetarian options or vegetarian diets, it seems to me to take away from the point. But I also understand that if people want to make it more emphatic by including that, I understand that. It just doesn't seem necessary to me.
Andy?
Yeah, I can just say again what I said in policy about why I think that we should keep the current language in this clause, or this section originated as in an effort to reduce meat consumption in our cafeterias. And I'm just in favor generally of having forthright language and language that is unmistakable. And if we mean meat, poultry, and fish, then we should just say it and avoid ambiguous language whose meaning changes over time if we can.
Helen and then Mariah.
I guess I have no problem with having good vegetarian options in our cafeteria, and I think we should. But I also think that we should have meat, poultry, and fish. You know, those are part of a diet, and some people may not eat it, and that's fine. They don't need to, but I don't think that we should impose on those who do eat it to not be able to have it. So I'm having trouble. I would prefer to take out that statement. I could possibly vote for it that way, but certainly with that in there, I will not. I think I don't see the purpose to that. I'm sorry.
Mariah?
Two things. I feel comfortable voting with that in the language. I certainly think that there's anyway, I would feel comfortable with voting that. with keeping explicit those elements. The second thing is a comment about transportation, and I don't see anything explicitly about our sustainability practices about transportation here, including encouraging non-car transportation wherever possible, walkable schools wherever possible, and so on and so forth. And I would like to see, if possible, that perhaps that came up at policy, I don't know, but that would be something that I would like to see.
Would you include e-buses and?
Are you asking me what I would?
Yeah.
I mean, just in general, I think that we should be talking about what we desire for a sustainable transportation approach, and it should be, non-fossil fuel producing ideally, but otherwise, I don't want to get into the wordsmithing of it now, but yes, e-buses and other things might have a role there.
E-things,
yeah. As long as they're, again, I mean, the point is like thinking about if the electricity itself is derived sustainably as opposed to just electricity that's being derived from non-sustainable resources as well.
Right. Andy?
Yeah, thanks. If I could try to address what Helen brought up, because we actually sort of had this conversation in policy as well, which is whether the current language implies that the aim is to eliminate meat altogether. And I think, saying that the goal is, so I'm not a vegetarian myself, right? And have no intention of becoming one in the near future. But to say that, the goal is to move away from one thing and toward another, given where we're starting out, which is very far from being meatless, we seem to land that, it doesn't really imply that the endpoint here is like total abolition of meat. So that was sort of where the discussion went in policy.
Ellen, did you want to speak again?
Well, yeah, I raised my hand about Mariah's comment, but first of all, I'll respond to Andy. I mean, I think, there are a lot of carnivores and, they haven't come to speak to us about this policy. I think having sustainable food makes sense. I have no problem with that. Maybe we raise our own chickens, and we slaughter them ourselves. That may be, the more sustainable way to do it. But I think that I have problems with putting that part in there. I don't have problems with having it be moving away from unsustainable foods. I do agree with Mariah, if we're talking about sustainability, that our buses, it should be aspirational because we can't commit ourselves to something that we can't afford or may not be available, though we are pursuing the possibility of electric buses. I do think even no matter where the electricity comes from, the pollution that our diesel buses produce right now, especially in the waiting times when they wait at the schools and stuff, is, I think just reason enough to go that way, despite, even if we don't have 100% renewable electricity.
Helen, there's a state law that they have to turn their engines off.
I understand that, but at 12 degrees it's kind of hard to do, and I must say that I've seen them not do it.
I know I have to, but it is a law. So
yeah, but by having an electric vehicle, they don't have that issue.
They don't have that issue.
Exactly. Is the whole point of it.
Exactly.
So I would agree that I think it could be amended, this policy, to include electric vehicles, probably not just for buses, but also for, the town has an electric vehicle policy, right? For the town staff. Correct?
Oh, for the town cars.
Right, for any of our town cars, but including school cars.
New cars, yeah.
Yeah.
Stephen?
Yeah, I just want to say that I think probably most people know that the Select Board Climate Action Committee has been disbanded and is being reformed as the Zero Emissions Advisory Board. So having some kind of zero emissions alignment in this policy would just put us in alignment in the direction that the town is moving anyway. But I also will just say that, can we, if we voted yes on this can we vote yes and say that we entrust to the policy subcommittee drafting an additional clause on this? Should they, or is that
Well,
kosher?
Stephen, I don't think we're going to vote on it tonight because it's
Oh, okay.
first reading. So this is the time to give our input to David and the policy committee, and they can make some changes.
Okay, well, and I just wanted to also comment that just listening to the back and forth on that clause that Amy highlighted, just for me, I can go either way. It just seems superfluous to me, but I have no ideological position on it.
David, correct me if I'm wrong, did you not have a discussion about the minimally processed food options? And perhaps
did,
we might
yes.
take that out because it was so confusing. People said tofu is minimally processed, or
Right, so the draft that we ultimately recommended did include and minimally processed in that sentence. It does sound upon further consideration that perhaps we should remove that again and address that issue in the wellness policy where food is discussed in greater detail.
Okay, I thought I saw Jennifer. Did you have your hand up? No.
No, I've been sort of just listening. I do think hearing other people's comments that we might want to think about really exploring some of we talked a little bit at our policy subcommittee meeting about the language and having common definitions around a number of things like organic or natural or minimally processed. And I think that we might need to do some of that work for the wellness policy. So I'm okay with moving that language to further discussion at another time through the wellness policy. I'm okay with that. That's all.
Yeah, thank you. Susan?
Yeah, I'm fine also moving it to a wellness discussion, the natural, organic, minimally processed piece. I would want to make sure though that by doing that, we're not just creating a different problem, just in a potential conflict, because I do think that, like, for example, and I think that examples are very important here. So if what we're talking about is moving from whatever options we have now to the kind of ketchup is a vegetable and, you know, French fries are just as good sort of thing, like that's not where we want to head. But at the same time, I'm completely in agreement with Ezra's comment that if, you know, the vegetarian options are like gross and, you know, and the meat options are kind of tasty, and then they're not, you know, we're going to be in sort of a different bad place. So I guess I'm happy to move this to wellness. I just think we have to think about this holistically, because processing food also has a pretty big environmental impact, whether it's meat or vegetarian. And I remember that when we did this last time, you know, we spent time thinking about the difference between, you know, what happens if we are asking our kitchens to basically take dough and tomato sauce and cheese and make a pizza versus get something that's a prepackaged pizza and they're basically just sort of warming it up. And the prepackaged pizza has like 50 ingredients and tons of preservatives and is very processed versus a 3-ingredient something that, you know, that is getting made fresh, and sort of what's the health benefits of that, what's the cost implication, taste, and so forth. So I guess I would just say that I'm happy to move this to wellness, but I would like the wellness committee to sort of think about it holistically as well, in making some of those determinations, because I think that's where I think it's the specific examples where the rubber meets the road, and it's less about sort of the phrases in the abstract, because I think the phrases in the abstract, you know, don't mean a lot and can kind of point us in the wrong direction. But anyway, I think we need to figure that out.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I will say, you know, this is a 1-pager, and each one of these topics could have, you know, 5, 6, 10 pages behind them. Stephen's going to talk a little bit about the education and engagement piece coming up next. So, you know, it's hard to know how much to put in this policy statement and how much is behind it and where that falls, all that behind the scenes stuff. So something to think about. Jennifer?
Yeah, just in listening to your comments, Suzanne, I think that one of the things I know other people have said about different policies before is that, you know, this may be our first version, and we may find that it doesn't do what we intended it to do, or have the impact that we had. And so, you know, I want us to also think about the possibility of needing to make revisions in the future and come back, and we may need to rework some of the language to make sure it captures what we really want. And I think to Susan's point, which is something that we talked about at the policy subcommittee meeting as well, was that we, you know, the intention was not for, or the hope was not that Meatless Mondays would become just to change the day so pizza was there, but that it was really providing lots of healthy options for students. And so for me, that you know, more natural food, less processed, minimally processed. We talked a lot of language there, is for all the food that we serve, and that this was really intended to be well, this is probably the prior policy, but intended to be a continuum of moving away from things that are more that are less sustainable to things that are more sustainable, and that was a continuum and not an absolute.
Thank you. Val?
I would just hope and recommend that we have wellness meet relatively soon, because it's come up twice in this conversation and at policy, and also on several other policies that we've discussed in the fall. So just a recommendation that we hopefully get that on the books soon so that we can keep the momentum going and move these things forward.
Yeah, that's good, Val. Stephen?
I just want to ask Dr. Guillory, does the strategic plan you're preparing now, will it address sustainability, do you think? Will you be setting goals or discussing an overall approach to sustainability for the district that fits within your vision?
So the strategic planning process will be one that, so the first step is the entry findings. That aspect of it basically just says, here's what you told me, right? The strategic planning process will be what the community says that this is what we want to focus on. So I'm not dictating to the community that this is the strategic plan. Together, we'll come to some consensus around what are the goals that we want to really focus on for the next 3 years or so. So that process will generate the plan that we come up with. And if there's enough input and support for that, then sustainability becomes one of those goals or milestones that gets included in there.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure that we weren't having a vision that duplicated part of the work that you're already doing.
So David, is that it for tonight on this piece?
Well, I just want to make sure that it seems a majority are on board with keeping the language as originally drafted by Ezra. Is that correct? Because I think that seems to be the main discussion point on this policy at this point.
The majority, I missed the beginning when Ezra presented, so I'm not sure what you mean. Are you saying the rest of the language or the language as a whole? Like, I want to see if there can be something about transportation added. Is that?
I'll just talk, yes, I agree with that suggestion. And I do think that's something that we'll work on further and include another paragraph that's specific to sustainability within transportation and zero emission vehicles, the electric school buses, and addressing those aspirations that we have as a district. But in terms of the food services paragraph, the sentence that we had been wrestling with at the subcommittee and again a bit this evening was around whether to explicitly mention moving away from meat, poultry, and fish. It sounds to me like a majority of us are comfortable with keeping that language. So I just want to know if that's the direction that we would like to go in as a committee as we work on the next draft of this.
You want a straw vote? You want thumbs up or something, or what would help you, David?
Thumbs up would be fine.
Helen
I
would like to comment.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we shouldn't see what happens on that Meatless Monday. And get some statistics on it before we go ahead and put this piece in here. We could be, the problem is that we could be ending up making everybody bring food from home as opposed to eating in the cafeterias, which is not something that we want to have happen. So by having this policy that says this, that's my thought.
Yeah, Jennifer?
I'm sorry, Helen, could you just clarify for me? So is the concern that because I don't think in the current version, unless I misunderstood, that the current language doesn't have specifically meatless Mondays, but just that it's our goal to move in a certain direction. So the meatless Monday specifically isn't in there. That's more of like if I understand correctly, and so someone correct me if I'm wrong, but that language isn't in there specifically. That would be more of like the procedure side of the policy, of the intention behind it. And we did have, and if I'm repeating someone's prior comments that I missed, please tell me. We did have a discussion at policy subcommittee specifically about the concern around the financial impact, and that right now, because of the way that the funding mechanism is working for student lunches, we sort of felt, or we were feeling, that there was some room for us to give this a trial, to see how it went and to collect information about what the impact was. And we spent, the thing that I was most excited about, I think, from walking away from that meeting was the student engagement around and the student interest in advocacy in moving forward in this direction. And so we talked a lot about how important it will be for student groups to really market this idea, not just as an alternative, but as a way to, I don't know, I'll put my own words out there, not their words, to promote change, social change, climate change. And so we keep hearing from students how concerned they are about this issue. And I think that students are looking for a way to take meaningful action. And so, we really, or I will say for myself, I really advocated for this, Ezra, who was there, that the student groups continue to market this amongst themselves and to work with other clubs that are also interested in this work to really publicize it, because we really need for them to, we really need for them to buy the meals that are the sustainable meals in order for us to continue to offer this kind of program. So that's just my 2 cents. So that was what I hope will come from this personally, in a policy mechanism.
Yeah, Mariah?
Back when it was, I guess, Whitson's, or maybe it was before Whitson's, there was meatless Mondays. So I presume we have some sort of data already. We don't need to speculate about whether kids won't eat food on meatless Mondays. We have that information already, or someone does. I don't have it, but it does exist somewhere.
I'm not sure it was ever collected, to be honest.
Yeah,
They didn't have data, they didn't have receipts on takings by day. I would be surprised, but what do I know?
Sasha's here, we could ask her.
Yeah, we can ask.
I think this was before Sasha, right? This was Whitson's. But
so we ran our own and then we went to Whitson's.
So I'm going to do Jennifer and then Val.
So Mariah, I think that it was during Whitson's. It was when we were there, and our participation levels were not where we wanted them to be or needed them to be. And I'm not sure if we still have access to that data because it was with Whitson's and it wasn't done through our own in-house people collecting data. So I don't know if it's out there, but I do know that I kind of feel like that information won't really capture what we might capture this year in sort of a rollout of that, because our participation was low in general at that time. And then we also did have some discussions about making these healthy options. Well, not that other options aren't healthy. I don't want to use the wrong words, but that these vegetarian options or highly sustainable options would be appetizing, but not simply just like the cheese pizza or the macaroni and cheese, but be nutritional and appetizing to increase student interest in that. And I sort of threw out ideas like veggie burgers and Beyond Burgers, which are plant-based options that are really popular among non-vegetarians as well.
Val?
Jennifer said a lot of what I was going to say, but I also think that in the last couple of years since Whitson's, the momentum on climate action, and particularly among young people, of really wanting to do something has shifted, and that Meatless Mondays may have very different dynamics this time around than they did even a few years ago. And I know that Sasha is looking, she presented to us at policy that she's looking at this time period while lunch is still free to everyone, and we can do this data collection from the 28th of this month through the end of the year to see how we do and to advise us on moving forward.
Sam?
Thank you. And I appreciate Ezra's comments. He had reached out to me and I directed him, and so he and Sasha both. And I did have Sasha respond to him, and I'm pleased that she responded to him. I wasn't aware until tonight that it got to this far along. That being said, and Mariah is well aware because of the financial implications, is I've looked, working with Sasha, Matt, and my understanding in the past, there was a food service advisory committee or something like that here. I created one of those in my first district, and we brought in Whitson's, believe it or not. We had Chartwells at the time, because of concerns about participation in the kind of offerings that were in Winchester, which is a somewhat similar district to Brookline. And a few wonderful things happened. One, and we were a legacy district for Whitson's. They were only on Long Island at the time. And we engaged community input. So I got 30% of the student body that was represented in a Survey Monkey. We had parent representation, committee representation, principal, student representation. And that feedback allowed, and we took all the feedback in, and I think the most important thing is we shared the communication out where people saw what the feedback is. We reported it in strands, the things that we could do in the short term, longer terms, and things that didn't make sense to do. And in doing so, what was important is we changed food service management companies with different kind of program. We raised prices, and participation went up through the roof. And that's quite counterintuitive to when you raise prices. And a program that lost, and this is 20 years ago or so, or 15 years ago, a program that lost 50,000, a third the size of Brookline. In 1 year, it made $125,000 surplus. And kids and the offerings were better. And so I'm looking to do that here. I was hoping to have a little bit more time to do that here because we're in the middle of a pandemic. And I think part of, it's limiting the kind of offerings given how we have to deliver the program. But I guess, but I'm looking to do the same thing, gather community input. And I'm not looking to change from a self-op. I think Sasha, I have confidence in Sasha that we can do this in-house and save the management fee, but it's all about communication, community engagement, getting the right people on the committee and communicating that out and making adjustments where necessary. And I'm committed to doing that. And I have every reason to believe we should never have to use the operating budget to cover deficits in the school lunch program. We should be having the program not only bring.
Did we lose Sam?
I think
No.
he got the hook.
He was on a roll too. Okay. Yeah. Sam, are you back?
There he is.
Okay. Sam, you there?
I am. I'll finish my thought before I think we got cut off.
Yeah.
Just my last thought. No, I mean, I was just going to say, I have every confidence that Sasha and the team of our wonderful food service workers and managers can deliver a program that will meet the vast majority of need in this program and be as sustainable as possible. And again, not only have enough money to break even, but allow reinvestment in the program to make the program sustainable in a financial way in the long term. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to say that tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sam. Thank you for your vision and your work that you're going to be doing on this. So thank you. I think we're going to move on, David, for now, because this was just a first reading. We may need a second and third. I'm not sure. So would that be okay?
Yes, I think it makes sense to move on at this point. I appreciate the feedback that all of you have provided, and we'll have another draft probably prior to when we have the second reading. Because I do think it's important that we add a transportation paragraph, as well as receive more feedback on the precise construction of the food services paragraph.
Okay, thank you. Sasha, I know you're here. I don't mean to be speaking around you or in front of you. You can say something if you'd like, but you don't need to. It's up to you.
No, thank you. I appreciate Sam's input as well. Our food service staff has been in training. We're partnering with a chef in school. They come in the school, they help our managers and our staff prepare those plant-based meal that many of you have been talking about. So I look forward to seeing what comes out of that option. We have Ezra's team did surveys on menu items that they think the kids will love. So we'll test them for this first round and see how that goes.
Well, thank you, Sasha. Thank you for all you do, for sure, especially during this pandemic time. It's not been easy. So we do appreciate all the good work and all the good food that you serve our students. Thank you. Stephen, I'm wondering, I see our two science people here. Could we let the science program go next and then we'll come to you? Would that be okay? You're not upset about that? Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. So if we can, we're going to go to the update on our science programs, and then we'll come back and circle around to Stephen's work on the environmental panel, sustainability panel. So Leslie, are you going to kick us off, or?
Yes, I'm going to kick us off. So let me share my screen. Second. Can everyone see my screen?
We can. I'm going to welcome Emily and Ed. So it's good to see you here, and we'll let you go ahead.
All right, so I'll jump right in. So I am really excited to collaborate with Ed Weiser, who is our 9 through 12 science coordinator at the high school, and Emily Speck, who is the pre-K to 8 science coordinator, to share some of the awesome work that is happening in the content area of science. Any opportunity that we have to talk about the teaching and learning that's happening in our schools is really exciting, given that that is our core business. So I'm going to go ahead and you guys see the presentation, right? Okay, just making sure. All right. I just introduced our two phenomenal coordinators. One of the things that I just want to say is that both Ed and Emily are so hands-on with this work. Ed not only leads the department, but also teaches. And very frequently, you can find Emily in a classroom with students teaching them. So they both have the experience of actually teaching to our students and getting that daily feedback around how our students are responding to what we're sharing. In today's presentation, in terms of a high school, we're going to focus on physics. And this is a really timely conversation, as this is the time of year that our students have course recommendations and course selections. And there has been a lot of talk about our leveled classes. And so Ed is going to talk about some of the work that he's doing. He and his team are doing around physics and some of the changes that they're making to that particular class. And then Emily's going to give a general overview of just K to 8 science, what that teaching and learning looks like in the classroom every day. And so I'm going to turn it over to Ed, and he's going to get us started. And Ed, just let me know when you need me to advance slides.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks for the great introduction too. It's good to see you all. This actually came from a presentation to the curriculum subcommittee about how we merged 2 of the AP Physics courses into one. And it was based on changes that the College Board made, the collaboration that the teachers were, they forced themselves to do due to the pandemic. And so that's where this conversation started, but also in the work that we're doing with 9th grade physics, especially now that we've moved into the unbelievably beautiful 22 Tappan. So you can hit the next slide, please. So just for a little bit of context, this is supposed to be very difficult to kind of grasp all of a sudden, but there were 2 AP Physics courses. One was called AP Physics C, the other one was AP Physics 1 and 2. But there were 4 exams total within those 2 courses. And that created a lot of confusion because some were viewed in certain ways as harder or easier, and everybody was very confused. But you can see that there were a lot of differences within the subject matter as well. Next slide, please. So just to give you a timeline, AP Physics B was the precursor of AP Physics 1 and 2. And we started that in 2001, shortly after we created the Physics First pilot for 9th grade physics back in '98. And from 2001 all the way through to 2017, we constantly worked to try to figure out how we could make the courses better, how we could increase enrollment and engagement. AP Physics B became a flipped model where the teacher took a lot of the PowerPoints and made them into videos along the way. And that also helped, but it didn't really nudge things forward for us until back in 2017, we had a big increase in enrollment when we told all of the students that AP Calculus BC, that requirement didn't necessarily need to be the requirement for you to be an AP Physics C, which means that a whole series of kids who are taking AP Calculus AB were allowed to take it. And we went to 5 sections total. My fun fact is that that year, of the approximately 200 students who took the AP Physics C electricity and magnetism exam, the female identifying students in the state who took that, of the 200 there, we represented 20, it was almost 20% of those students were female from Brookline High. It's such an esoteric exam, but it just really speaks to the fact that such great work was done by the teachers. So, but because of the pandemic, we merged the classes. And so I'd like to give you a little bit more reasons why. And right now, the focus on the future is trying to figure out how we can find more barriers to eliminate, how much more coding we can introduce into the class, and use enrollment and student engagement as indicators of success. Next slide, please. Thank you. So students always asked the simple questions: which one's harder, which one's easier, which one's more fun? And what we found was that the kids always just kind of equated that, well, calculus must make it harder, but statistically, AP Physics 1 and 2 was actually harder. But the key factor there is the imposter syndrome really impacted female identifying students and students of color and didn't make much sense, because with just a little bit of nudge, they would easily be able to take the AP Physics C course. So next slide, please. So basically it created de facto levels. I love this background because that was the former Phyznasium in Old Lincoln School, where we had a great little professional development session with Gene Thompson Grove. So yeah, the de facto levels, sorry. Exam confusion, nobody knew what was going on. No matter what we did, everybody was confused. And it led to a persistent bias that AP Physics C had more prestige than AP Physics 1 and 2, and it created systematic bias within our process. And part of that was because of college acceptance. They thought that C was the classic physics content with calculus, and that basically drove everybody's decisions. Next slide, please. So who took the harder one? Students who were chosen for advanced math at a young age. And who took the easier ones? The students who received the biased messages. When in fact, the kids who struggled the most were often the kids who were put in there because they just thought they should be there. And so when we took a real hard look at that, like, how do you then bring those two classes together? And the teachers who were involved with that, Tyler Brown and Julia Mangan, they were able to figure out, well, if we do this and that and that and this, and if these topics line up here, what we have to do is blah, blah, blah. And they went through the whole list, mapped everything out. And here we are this year, working really hard, and it's coming along. Next slide, please. So we merged the two classes into one. So now students can select a combination of 3 AP physics exams, and they can learn to code and to model physics that way. Students get more support from each other because there are fewer. So quickly, instead of 2 sections of this one and 2 sections of this one, we could have 4, and everybody could support each other inside and outside of class. And the teachers can support each other. And the key of all of this is obviously the student and teacher collaboration. That's why I put this picture of, that's room 402 and 22 Tappan Street. And one of the key features of it, you'll see the garage door opens up, and we can have the students actually walk out of the classroom and work together. So the challenges, what are we dealing with? So we need to restructure the first few units of AP Physics so that the level of rigor in math increases gradually, as opposed to the classic way where it's just a gatekeeping, slap in the face, like, oh, welcome to physics, and all of this math comes right at you, right out of the gate. We want to figure out a better way to have that be a smooth on-ramp. And also adapting online resources to support this additional exam for AP Physics C, electricity and magnetism. I'm able to help the teachers with that, and we're starting to create those online resources for students to be able to take that exam, which has the same content of the AP Physics 2 electricity and magnetism, but just with a few calculus tricks. One of the other things that we've been dealing with is are the assessments. We had many of the students take retakes. So if they didn't get a threshold, they would be able to practice and redo that work. But sometimes we realize that some students, when they plateau to this success, they don't break through and get a perfect score. It's not taken as well. So we're trying to play with that as well. And coding and college readiness. We need to know if all of the coding activities that have been infused into the course through the innovation funds work. And Tyler Brown and the math teachers are doing a great job with that, not just putting it into physics and math classes, but specifically AP Physics. Is this really helping the students out? Are they finding that there's a huge return on that investment? And also, are they prepared for all STEM majors? These are the types of things we'd like to figure out. So next steps, it's a great microcosm for the 9th grade work, where we have the 2 levels of Physics 1 and Physics 1 honor. So again, we're thrilled to be in 22 Tappan, and we're going to use those spaces for more experiential learning and for having the students heterogeneously group from Physics 1 to Physics 1 honor. We're going to strategically think about that for next year. And how do we balance that innovation in assessment with traditional assessment, which kids seem to be used to, and has its purpose. But we also need to figure out those units within 9th grade physics where we can really differentiate and go into that advanced level. We've been doing that work a lot, but that's definitely our next step. And again, collaboration is the key. We want to make sure that we have good common planning time, not just the collaborative time that is once or twice a week. And a simpler bell schedule will really help us out in the near future, and we're all working towards that too. So yeah, that's my presentation. I don't know if we want to do a Q&A now, or I can wait until after Emily does her part.
Sure. So I think if it's okay with the committee, we will dive into Emily's piece and then have a larger Q&A at the end. Does that sound good, Suzanne?
That's fine, Leslie.
All right, so I'll turn things over to Emily.
Awesome. Thank you, Leslie. And thank you, Ed, for getting us started on our science journey tonight. I'm very excited to be here today to share some information about our K-8 science program. There's a lot of exciting things happening, and we're really proud of the work that all the teachers are doing in that program. So our K-8 science and technology program is really designed to make sure that all of our students get a chance to experience creative, coherent, and culturally responsive curriculum that sets them up to be scientifically literate citizens and be able to go on to be successful in all of those wonderful high school classes that Ed just spoke about, as well as their postgraduate explorations in science, whether that be in a STEM career or just as a citizen of a scientifically literate world. Next slide, please. So what we teach in the K-8 science is based on both the NGSS, which stands for Next Generation Science Standards, and the Math Science Standards. And those all stem from decades of research that was done by a variety of organizations and states that culminated in a document called the Framework for K-12 Science Education in 2012. And then that framework, which really described what it is that we need students to learn when developmentally they're ready to learn those things, was used to craft the Next Generation Science Standards, which was created by a collaboration of 26 states, including Massachusetts. And then Massachusetts took those science standards pretty much wholesale with a few changes, and in 2016 adopted those as the standards we use here in Massachusetts for science education. Next slide. And so the old standards and the new standards are really quite different in exciting ways. So the new standards really give us some opportunities to re-envision and reinvigorate science education. So in the old standards, really it was a list of things for people to know, for students to know. And we did have some standards on the scientific method, but it was a very kind of linear thought process that students went through. And where the standards were placed felt a little random. It wasn't clearly developmentally set up to think about when students were developing abstract thinking skills. And so in the new standards, they really tried to address some of those concerns. The new standards don't just look at the content of science, they actually combine three aspects of science. They have the content still, but they merge that with the scientific practices, the way science is done, and these things called cross-cutting concept, these big ideas that tie together all the fields of science and really tie together many fields of knowledge, even beyond science. One of the cross-cutting concepts, for example, is patterns. And you can imagine patterns as a really universal idea that falls into a lot of academic realms. They also, with the practices, instead of thinking of it as a linear scientific method, which probably is what most of us learned when we were in school, they really think about 8 different types of work that scientists do. And they think of that as a really iterative process where you go from one type of work to another type of work, and that informs another thing that you need to do. And so we're really giving students the opportunity to engage in science in this really iterative and exciting way. And they also did a lot of research and a lot of thought into thinking about when students developmentally are prepared to understand and build their own conceptual understandings of certain ideas. And then they also thought about, like, what kinds of ideas do you need to know before other ideas? So they set it up in a really developmentally progressive way. Next slide. Another really exciting thing that the new standards encourage us to do is something called anchoring phenomena. So what we want students doing is we want students figuring out things about the world, which is what scientists do, right? They notice something, they're intrigued by something, they want to figure it out, they ask questions, they do research, they design experiments. And so we want to create a science education program that allows students to have those same opportunities from the moment they start their science education. And we do that through using these things called anchoring phenomena. So at the start of units, students are introduced to a puzzling phenomena. It can take different forms. It can take the form of an experiment or a video or something that they've noticed in their lives. And from that, students generate questions that they want to figure out. And they create an initial model about what they think might be happening based on their experiences that they've already had, because students aren't blank slates. They come in with so many ideas and so much information. And then throughout the course of the unit, we use their questions, their models, and we help infuse the resources they need to develop a deeper, more scientifically accurate understanding. And then by the end of the unit, they're creating models of those phenomena that are more sophisticated and more scientifically accurate. Next slide. So with that being what we are aiming for, this is how we want to teach, this is why we want to teach that way, where this background comes from. We want to think about where is Brookline on the journey to achieving that, that quality science education that we're looking for. And so in my first couple of years in the district, I've spent a lot of time kind of looking through and trying to understand the current status of our science curriculum. And there's a lot of strengths we have already in place that we can really build on. We have a great culture in our K-8 schools of using scientific notebooks in instruction and really having students build kind of their own textbook of understanding. The teachers and students have had a lot of time to work together on building scientific discourse, which is a really important way in which scientists make sense of the world around them and share what they understand and share their questions with each other. And teachers in our K-8 have completely embraced hands-on exploration of science concepts. So we have students who are doing things with science at all grade levels in our classrooms. But in addition to our strengths, there are some areas in which we can improve on and make our curriculum stronger and more in line with that vision that was set out by NGSS. So our K-8 science curriculum was last updated between 2010 and 2015. And if you'll remember from my earlier slide, the math standards were adopted in 2016. So all of our current K-8 science curriculum was last revised before the standards were adopted and implemented in Massachusetts. And so they're not particularly well aligned right now to the new standards. In some places there's better alignment, some places there's poorer alignment, but there's room for improvement. We also have, we need more professional development for our K-5 teachers about what these new standards are, what they say, how they are different from what they were teaching from before, and how to use those phenomena in a classroom. And our K-5 students need more opportunities to design their own investigations and analyze data, not just kind of be given a set of instructions or a recipe to follow, but to really think about questions they have, how they design experiments. So we want to infuse more of that piece of the practice into their already robust hands-on exploration. Next slide, Leslie. Another way to look at this Brookline alignment, and this is just showing 2 grade levels, but I did this for all the grades K-5, is I kind of looked at what are our current units, when did we last revise them? So I shared that information on the last slide. And then looking through the resources and talking to the teachers, how do those align to what the standards are at that grade level? And what I found is that that we had kind of a mix of different concerns in terms of alignment. We had standards that were completely missing, that they weren't showing up anywhere in the K-5 curriculum. And so you can see in K-2, some of the, or not K-2, this 2 to 3 example here, some of the standards that are marked in red just weren't being taught in K-5. We had some standards that they were being addressed, but only partially. And this was in part because of the difference between the old standards and the new standards. So some of the content was being addressed, but not some of that, the deeper connections to the practices of the cross-cutting concepts. And then we had other set of standards that we were teaching somewhere in K-5, but they were happening in a different grade level. And often that caused problems because, as I said before, NGSS was really aiming to think developmentally about the progression of how content is developed over time in science. And so when we put things in a different grade level, it's often not being taught at the level in which the students need it to be successful in the next thing that they're going to be learning in that content area. So those were some concerns that, that we had. So next slide. So what we're doing is an initial pilot to help start addressing some of those concerns. And I'm super excited about this. Leslie gets to hear me talk about this all the time. And we are doing a pilot in 3rd grade. 3rd grade was one of the areas in which we had many examples of standards that were missing. And so we wanted to find a way to get those into the curriculum as quickly as possible. And part of that pilot was to look at both a a curriculum unit from a professional company called Amplify Science. So we did a weather and climate pilot from that, and then also do a unit that was being co-written with Brookline teachers, and we did a life cycle and traits unit in which students are raising trout eggs that are spawned here in Massachusetts with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and then they bring them to the schools and we raise them and we study them, and then we will release them in the spring back out into the wild to be part of the Brookline ecosystem. So we are very excited about both of those units. And when we talk about a pilot, we're piloting kind of for two reasons. One of the reasons we're piloting is we want to choose resources that will work in classrooms with kids, because if they don't work with kids, they're not worth investing in. But we also want to take those resources, think about what works well about them and how we could refine them and make them even better. So as you know, Brookline teachers are really committed to giving our students the best education possible, and they really want to keep improving and keep working on and making things better. So we're doing an initial pilot now, but this pilot isn't necessarily going to be a decision maker for everything down the road, because we'll want that opportunity for all of our revisions to have a small group of teachers be able to really dig into those resources, make sure they work for students, and do any additional revisions necessary. So next slide, Leslie, please. So we've had some initial findings from our pilot so far. We have a lot of successes and a lot of challenges, like any new endeavor. We've had a lot of engagement from both the teachers who are involved. We have 7 teachers, all of the 3rd grade teachers at Baker and Runkle are part of this project, and a lot of engagement from the students. We have been able to have really successful integration of math and ELA skills into our science lessons, so kind of working towards that interdisciplinary learning, which we believe is really important. And these units have very strong development of those scientific practices and skills that we spoke about earlier. Some of the challenges we had, and I spoke even more in depth about these at the curriculum subcommittee if you're interested in seeing more from that presentation, but we are struggling in the pilot and also across the district finding adequate time for science lessons. We have a lot of unique scheduling challenges in all of our different schools and a lot of rich opportunities, but that does make it a challenge to meet the expectations from the state on the time and get to all of the things that we would ideally want to do. It's also a very challenging time right now, as you know, to find subs, and it's challenging to figure out the best way to provide adequate professional learning support for teachers. So they're really eager to dig into this work. And we were really lucky that I was able to do kind of a workshop with the teachers who are piloting this summer. But as we move forward and think about incorporating this into classrooms across the district, we would want to make sure we had a structure in place to offer professional learning for all of the teachers so that they feel like they can successfully implement these units the way that we are hoping they'll be experienced for teachers and students. And then as we think forward, right, there's a lot of upfront costs in starting new units. Once we get them established, there's less recurring costs, but we want to think about what is the financial implication of scaling up a pilot that is taking place with 7 teachers to the whole district, and how do we support that in a way that's sustainable. So next slide, Leslie. So here's a very draft early thinking, because no one curriculum area is the sole focus of a K-5 teacher. They really have to think across the board. And so as coordinators, we also want to think about how we are working with those teachers and what we're asking of them. So this is still very draft as we work with the coordinators and the teachers to figure out the right timeline to bring our science curriculum into alignment. But right now we are starting that pilot that I spoke about. We're going to evaluate that pilot, and our hope is to implement some new units next year in third grade. So to bring this to all the rest of the classrooms in the third grade level in Brookline. And then to begin some of that piloting at other grade levels so that we can start to address the misalignment at those grade levels as well. We anticipate that there would be at least 3 or 4 additional years of incremental piloting, revising, and implementing curriculum in order to address all of those places in which we had red, orange, or yellow standards that needed to be addressed, with a goal of by SY26 having more complete implementation of science curriculum that aligns to the 2016 standards. Next slide. So that was a lot on K-5, and there's and I've been focused a lot on that pilot this year, but there's also some really amazing things happening in our 6 to 8 grade levels. Last year, despite the pandemic, we were really lucky to have a BEF-funded Museum of Science Institute, which all of the middle school science teachers were able to take part in at least some of the institute. And we focused on those anchoring phenomena that I mentioned earlier, and had a lot of great collaborative work thinking about how we could bring those into our middle school science curriculum. This year, we also have some selected classrooms that are piloting a free open source curriculum called Open SciEd that's being designed by teachers across the country, including teachers here in Massachusetts, that is purposely created to go along with these new science standards and bring in those anchoring phenomena. And so this just creates another resource to help teachers think about this new way of teaching and really bring its excitement into the classroom. And there's also a lot of commitment and energy in our 6 to 8 teachers about incorporating environmental justice and social justice lenses into the units that they're teaching, so that we can make them both applicable to our students' lives and also help our students do good in the world. And this is just a picture here of a lesson from one of these Open SciEd units that was happening in a classroom where students were designing experiments to try and understand what are the different sources of humidity in the atmosphere, and thinking about what different variables might affect that. So it was a really successful lesson. All right, next slide, Leslie. So going forward, here are some of the things that I anticipate working on over the remainder of this school year and early next school year. So we want to continue to gather pilot feedback. I'm meeting with my pilot teachers tomorrow to get some feedback on how the units are going, what things we want to refine and make better. We also want to look at some of the student work and make sure that the outcomes from those units are what we're anticipating that they'll be. We want to prepare for that implementation for third grade next year, to think about how can we bring some of these experiences to the other schools and the other third graders across the district, which means refining the documentation to make sure that it's as teacher friendly as it can be. And we also need to develop that professional learning plan that I spoke of earlier. And then we want to think about how to expand the pilot to new grades, both the Open SciEd middle school pilot for those who are interested, as well as the revisions to the K-5 curriculum. So we'll need to think about running some summer workshops to prepare pilot teachers to kind of jump into trying out this new way of teaching. And we also are really committed to ensuring that as we make these revisions to new units, we are also mindful of diverse representation of scientists and scientific expertise, because we want to make sure that we don't have to go back and make our resources culturally responsive. We want to make sure they're culturally responsive from the design. So that is our plan going forward. And I think we can take some questions now.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Ed. And I see hands up already. So I saw Jennifer and then Val.
Thank you both for coming tonight again and for coming to the curriculum subcommittee meeting. This is, it's so exciting to hear about it. I wanted to thank, well, I sort of split my comments I was going through. So Ed, thank you so much for coming. I wanted to thank you for the thoughtful work about thinking about who's taking our courses and how we can best support them, and looking at a lot of that data and really being reflective on that. And I want to really underscore the importance, well, that you mentioned in your presentation of including coding and sort of reflecting on whether or not what we're doing is really meeting students' needs and being effective. And I really wanted to just highlight that. I think it's really important. I think that there's so much coding that's impacting so many different career paths. And we want to make sure that what we're offering students is helping them actually, meet those needs. So that's really great. I'm excited about that. And Emily, I wanted to thank you also for coming. I'm really excited about this work around the alignment of the Brookline standards with the NGSS and our state and national benchmarks and objectives. And I really appreciate you taking a deep dive into that. That work is really important. It's exciting to see more emphasis on anchoring phenomena and inquiry-based methods and looking at science education. I'm excited about the pilots. I wanted to ask specifically, I was wondering, how did you end up with Amplify Science for the weather and climate? And I was really excited about, I just think the whole idea of students fostering these, the fish eggs and the life cycle work, and then it going right back into the Brookline ecosystem is really exciting. It's just so concrete and immediate and relevant for students. I love that. And so I just was wondering, I know why, I think I understand why you chose that work, because of that sort of the red zone there and the need for that, pressing need for that. And just was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how we ended up with those particular programs. And I really want us to create a space for thinking about how we can find time for science lessons in our days. Sorry, and my last thought was about PD. And we heard from a math presentation, and there was a discussion of like job embedded PD. And I just didn't know if that was a potential area for us to be able to offer more science PD, especially maybe next year when we've had some teachers pilot this unit, and maybe the opportunity for new piloting teachers to come and work with the existing teachers who've already gone through the unit once to do some PD. So I'm sorry, that was a lot, but this might be my only chance to talk. So I got it all out at once.
Yeah, it was a lot, but all very awesome points that I'm excited to talk about. So yeah, so I think I'll start with the last one, the PD one. I think what math is doing this year with that job embedded professional development is amazing. One of the things that really supports that, of course, is the district-wide math coaches and school-based math specialists. So it would be really awesome if at some point we found a way to give me a little bit more support. But I think that idea of using the pilot teachers is definitely one that we are looking into and thinking about. Of course, they also have their full-time classroom jobs, so we would want to think really carefully about not overburdening them, but still using their expertise and what they learned this year. And then in terms of the choice of the programs, so I've worked in K-8 science education in several different communities around here. And in that, I have both taught and helped coach different science curriculums. So I'm familiar with kind of what that landscape looks like. We also have resources like the Curate reports and Ed reports that gives kind of analysis of different curriculum resources. And I have a network of fellow science curriculum leaders who I work with closely to think about it. And so kind of looking at all of that information, Amplify Science came the closest for K-5 curriculum unit for both being tightly aligned to the new standards, bringing in some of that anchoring phenomena stuff. It was the highest rated Ed Reports K-5 science curriculum. And so it felt like a good tool to try this year. And one of the things that I kind of really posed to the pilot teachers when we started this project was, in the past, all of the elementary science curriculum in Brookline has been homegrown, created by teachers. And there's a lot of value to that, but it's also, there's also downsides in terms of comprehensiveness of the resources and ability to update them in regular fashion. And so we wanted to see that experience side by side, starting from ground up and creating a unit together and using this professional curriculum. And I think what I found so far from the pilot and from the teachers is actually, right, like, because there are benefits from both, we may end up with sort of a hybrid solution where sometimes it makes sense to use a unit like Amplify that comes with all of the pieces ready-made, the slideshows and the word walls. And sometimes we will have a local context that is so compelling that it's worth the additional effort for writing. So my expectation is that we're going to have some sort of hybrid solution moving forward where we don't move completely over to a particular product and we don't stay completely in the homegrown, but have some sort of mixture going forward. And then, of course, time on science. I love science. We work on integration. We work to make the best of the time that we have available, and still we would always love more time. And I know that every single content area will say the same thing. But yeah, we would love to find creative ways to keep expanding that time so that it's really useful for students.
Thank you, Emily. Yeah, Val, and then Mariah, and then Stephen. Val, go ahead.
Emily and Ed, thank you both for your presentations. They were wonderful. Ed, thank you for the thoughtfulness around the equity lens, and Emily for that really great overview of the curriculum. Emily, my question for you first. I saw K-5 and K-8, and I know that we're somewhat unique in our K-8 model, and saw where we were aligned and misaligned in the K-5. I was wondering if you could speak to where we are aligned and perhaps misaligned in the 6-8 realm with the standards.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a little more complicated. So K-5, of course, classroom teachers are teaching multiple subjects, and they tend to rely a little bit more on the curriculum resources that come directly from the coordinator. Whereas in 6-8, we have specialists who teach science as their primary or mostly their primary role, and who are also science experts themselves. So although the last kind of overhaul of the middle school science curriculum happened in 2010, middle school science teachers have been continuing to update and refine and bring in new information. And so their alignment is not quite as far off, even though the like wholesale revision was before the new standards. And it does vary quite a bit from school to school. There is a lot of autonomy, and there isn't a single curriculum product that they're using. It's homegrown, but it's homegrown by individual teachers as opposed to a like single thing. And so part of our work moving forward is to think about how can we keep feeding that curriculum writing passion that our middle school teachers have, but bring us a little closer together so that they can collaborate and support each other really effectively. And so in the middle school, we do have department meeting time, so we can work on that in a regular way. That's a little different than the structure we have at K-5. So that's part of the work. And I think the pilots with Open SciEd are helping us both kind of with this pedagogical strategy of anchoring phenomena, but also helping us think about, like, are there certain things that we would want to all do in common? And which ones do teachers want to kind of keep at their own style in their own way? Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you, Emily. And then Ed, my question for you, and maybe Janae and Leslie, I'm not sure who would take this, is on the equity piece and on how we're getting students into the course where they would be most successful rather than where they feel like they're going to be tracked. How are we working on that holistically as a team, and how are we working with the 8th grade teams on and the K-8 teams on that as well?
Yeah, in terms of the AP Physics, so when we have such a wide array of courses to choose from, a lot of it is student preference, but a lot of it is a lot of the other messages. So what we try to do is give the best advice for every single student when they're moving forward. But I think the bigger question that you're getting at is the 8th to 9th grade transition. Yeah, I don't know if Leslie, do you want to take that?
Sure, I can jump in here. So one of the things that I think's been really helpful is having Gabe McCormick really dedicated to working at the high school and spending some time focusing on the 8th to 9th grade transition. And so one of the things that he did this year was work with the coordinators to really outline the courses, the differences between the courses, document that, and then share that with our 8th grade teams and our K-8 coordinators so that they could in turn also support our 8th grade teachers with course recommendations. Now, one of the things, I think kind of the elephant in the room is around the leveled courses. And so I think that's certainly something, just as Dr. Guillory is coming up with his report of findings that will then contribute to a strategic plan, we're very much doing that in the Office of Teaching and Learning as well. And so we will certainly have some findings around the course leveling. But the one thing I want to be really clear about is that you don't want to take a situation or an issue and make an abrupt change without being really thoughtful about what that change looks like, because in turn, you have these unintended consequences. So while there are a lot of questions about deleveling, we want to be really thoughtful about what our next move is. And that's going to take us some time. But one of the things that I think is really imperative to that course recommendation process is the involvement of parents. When teachers are unsure, when there are questions at hand, I've really been pushing, get parents involved, let's get their say as well, in addition to what the teacher thought is in that process. So I think, Val, to answer your question a little bit more directly, the more immediate steps we've taken is just working with the coordinators, and the coordinators have been amazing to work with. They've been incredibly thoughtful, and just really documenting what are the courses and making sure that we're sharing accurate information with the 8th grade teachers.
Great. And then Janae, are we doing any data tracking on this?
So I was just going to add and just follow up on both Ed and Leslie, and thank you, Emily, too. In addition to the pieces that Leslie and Ed just spoke to, even in principal meetings, the conversations that are happening with coordinators, we're having similar conversations with principals just to think about what does it look like for educators to have these conversations with students and bring in families, bring in parents, and really engage with what the relationship building looks like. What does it mean to go through the steps of having these conversations? How do we check our implicit biases? What are the pieces that we're sort of researching and reminding ourselves of and studying? And so that work is happening alongside everything else that Leslie mentioned about the work that Gabe's doing, and others. And I think, I thought you were about to ask a question about data. I think you were going to say, Val.
If you're tracking over time of how this is rolling out.
Yeah, we've kept a close eye on it all along, and we're continuing to do that. I know we've thought a lot about Azavia's comments from several weeks ago, and just thinking about what it looks like for teachers to really have these conversations, and counselors, and making sure families know what they need to know, which is something that we have done, but really taking a close look at it, as Leslie mentioned.
Thank you all for your thoughtful response.
Thank you, Val. Mariah, and then Stephen, and then Andy.
Thanks. Thanks for the presentation, Emily and Ed. Sorry, I'm being asked to pour a bowl of Cheez-Its right now. My question was, and I think Jen started by making a couple comments on this. Okay. a couple comments about coding. And my question, I saw, Ed, in your slide, it was in the future work, right, is about this idea of coding and how that gets incorporated into this. And then it was that was one thing I was thinking about, and then thinking about in K-8. Now, I don't know if everything that's on the slides is representative of the full K-8 curriculum, but it seems sort of heavily anchored in environmental science from what I can tell, and sustainability. And maybe that's not, what I captured briefly now is not the full reflection of what's going on, but how we're thinking about what you talked about, Ed, in terms of imposter syndrome, and how we're making sure that we're sort of, as we think about what happens when you get all the way through your undergraduate and potentially graduate degrees, and the change in demographics that occurs, and sort of look at engineering, and it's only about 20% women, even at the bachelor's level, and then you get higher up, it even drops a little bit further, but particularly underrepresented minorities in engineering can be down to like single-digit percentage representation. So what are we doing, I guess, is my question, thinking about this as an equity, imposter syndrome, coding question, to think about how we can address some of those things, same things you flagged, Ed, at the high school level, but bring it down earlier so that people feel comfortable and we can avoid that imposter syndrome at the youngest ages, particularly in this coding side where we maybe don't have as much going on, although I could be wrong in that, and I would be happy to be corrected.
Awesome question, Mariah. And I would say, I think there are a lot of opportunities in the current curriculum for students to engage in kind of the engineering process. So the 2 units that we're piloting this year aren't physical science focused, but there is another 3rd unit in 3rd grade on structures that is very heavily physically science focused, and is about, includes thinking about being an engineer and kind of how structural engineers work. And there will be some modifications to that in the future, but the underlying piece about engineering is in every grade level, including a lot of the environmentally focused ones as well, will have engineering and biomimicry engineering. So I think that is pretty strong in our K-8 curriculum and will continue to be refined. I think the coding piece is very, very sparse and inconsistent right now in our K-8 curriculum. There are certain teachers in the 6 to 8 realm who incorporate it into the science classroom, have projects that involve using Scratch or other coding. I think this also crosses a little bit over into the library and ed tech realm. So Scott and I sometimes talk about like, how do we work together and think about how our departments work together to approach that. I know that at Baker there's a program this year, a STEM extension program, and I'm evaluating the young lady who's teaching that. And I was watching her teach a 2nd grade coding class today about conditional. So that is one model that is bringing some coding into those grade levels. But it is something that I do think is a big area of growth, and is a little bit of a no man's land because it's not technically in the science standards, but I think there's so much overlap with the science standards that it makes a lot of sense for that to be part of the work that we do in K-8 science. And I also think there's really interesting ways that coding can be incorporated into other subject areas as well. And I'd be happy to like work with coordinators and Scott on thinking about that in addition.
Can I make just one little comment? Oh, go ahead, Ed, and then I'll.
Oh, yeah, and I was going to say, it's also, don't forget your question. I was going to say, it's honestly one of the hardest things to teach. And nobody really knows where coding lives. Does it live in science? Does it live in math? Where is it in career ed? Who knows? So we're trying to bring all that together. But an example of what we did last year during the pandemic was just simply trying to figure out if kids can take a chunk of code and see that it's really just a slightly different language. Maybe coding should live in world language. I don't know. I'll talk to Rachel. But I'm just trying to get the kids to see that, well, if you just change this, then what's the outcome? But what we did was we had students at home just roll the dice and walk around the room, and depending on how much randomness in a range of degrees that you could get, Like, where would you end up? And then we took it another step further into coding. And then your little, I wish I could describe it really well. Your dot would touch another dot and it would change a different color. And then what it became was a way to show how viruses can be spread throughout a whole community. And it was just a model for it, but we showed the kids that you could do that. And it was, honestly, it was great for some kids, but it felt contrived for others. And trying to get that sweet spot of where you bring in everybody, that is really difficult. That's going to take some time. So I just thought I'd put that out there. But what was your question, Ryan?
It wasn't, it was just more of a comment that I think what Emily said about, or maybe it was you just saying about no man's land, and maybe really it's an opportunity for it to be a cross-disciplinary program and to be incorporated into more things. I think also about wasn't it the course that Josh Paris presented 2 weeks ago to us about, is it data science and justice? I don't remember, I'm not going to get the name right of the course, but again, thinking about how we can bring, for example, coding and ethics together, coding and, there's a lot of different ways to do that. And I hope we can bulk that up, whether it's through science or the other areas as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephen, and then Andy.
I just want to add another note of thanks to you both for your pragmatic application of an equity lens to the work you're doing. Just more appreciation on that. I really am constantly feeling like that conversation is being led from the ground up, and that's great. I have a question for you, Emily. First, I just want to say thank you for describing your process for selecting Amplify as a curriculum. I'm really grateful to know how seriously you took reviewing the evidence base before making your decision. I just have a small question about Amplify. And I feel like maybe you said it and I missed it. How hands-on is it? How computer-based is it?
So the K-5 Amplify units have an option to be like have individual student accounts, but we didn't use that option this year. So it's so there's a few simulations and kind of online activities that kids could do, but it's primarily a very traditional K-5 science curriculum with the addition of some embedded literacy work. So one of the things that Amplify does with its science units is it has proprietary nonfiction that it incorporates into there that ties in really well with the lessons and the hands-on.
But just to be really clear, that proprietary nonfiction, that's accessible via books rather than via software.
Exactly. Well, it's actually it's available by both physical books and online books, which actually gives a lot of flexibility to the teacher so that you can sit down and have kids pair reading books or sitting on a rug and reading, or you can have the book projected up onto a smart board and look at it that way. So they have both options available. And again, I think our teachers mostly used the physical books this year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Andy?
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. So like all the others, I'm very grateful for your presentations and for your devotion to science education. I'm a scientist myself, so nothing could matter more to me than this. I was wondering if I could follow up with Ed about this topic of how calculus and physics are intertwined. So if I understood what you were saying, it was before 2017, to take physics C, you were required to concurrently be taking calculus BC, is that right? And then after 2017, you could take physics C concurrently with calculus AB. And then since the pandemic, there's this consolidated AP physics course. And is there any calculus requirement associated with that now?
Yes. So part of the other issue was the AP Physics 1 exam wasn't just mechanics. It was mechanics and a few other topics, including a little slice of circuits. It was interesting. So the pandemic forced the College Board to just say, you know what, we're going to focus, AP Physics 1 is just going to become mechanics. So then the difference between AP Physics 1 and AP Physics C mechanics was just a few calculus tricks. So now students are going to be able to choose whether they take the AP Physics 1 exam or the AP Physics C mechanics exam based on their level of comfort with the math, but they're in the same classroom.
See. It just seems like an incredible challenge to design a course that will serve both groups of students, those who are taking calculus and those who aren't. You know, challenge them both without causing anybody to despair, right?
Yeah, but that's the joke is kind of that everybody can do. Like, if you think you can do AP Physics 1, just let me teach you a little bit about how the slope of this line is basically the derivative. So poof, now here's the little calculus trick, and you can do the AP Physics C mechanics exam. So we're telling all the students, you can do this. And
so now at this point, there's no explicit calculus requirement for the course, but a lot of the material is sort of a gateway drug for calculus. Is that?
No, it's more like there were so many students who, well, BC calculus, in order to be there, you're basically in the advanced math track the entire time. Whereas the AB calculus is not. So there are students who don't feel like they're able to be in the advanced math class, therefore they were never considered for AP Physics C. So now we're bringing them all together, and it really so it's not as hard to do, because it was a little bit of smoke and mirrors from the College Board about the differences between those two courses.
I see. So everybody in the current AP Physics is taking calculus at one of those two levels. No one is without calculus altogether. Okay.
Exactly.
All right. That seems to be more.
Yeah. And then the other exam that they're going to take is the AP Physics 2 exam. And then if they want to, they can elect to also take the AP Physics C E&M exam. So yeah, it's still complicated, but it's better.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Now, Jennifer, before I go back to you, because you have spoken, I just want to make sure if David or Helen or Susan want to jump in at all.
I just want to say thank you. I think this is just incredible. We're so lucky to have just listening, Emily, Ed, Leslie, Janae, just all of your comments. And just we've been wrestling down this problem for such a long time. So just thank you for continuing to pound away at it. We're lucky to have you.
Thank you.
I'll just say ditto. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I similarly appreciate the thoroughness of this presentation, the detail, the thoughtfulness that went into the decisions that have been made. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in, Jennifer, then I'm going to let you speak. So this is something we've been grappling with for a number of years. When I first came on the committee 4 or 5 years ago, the alarms were going off. Students were not getting the science time in the K to 5 or pre-K to 5 that not only we thought they needed and deserved, but that the state mandated. So the minutes just were not there, and it sounds like it's still a challenge. And I would guess that you would have full support from the committee on how we're going to figure this out. I don't know exactly what that looks like and how it will happen, but I do believe, Emily, that there's strong support for more science. And if that means that, as you said, that you've been able to integrate math and ELA into the science, and so you take a little bit from that and put it into that, how you have to move things around a little bit, I would guess you would have support for that. Because many of us came on board and wanted to make sure that there's a full curriculum and program in science. I mean, also, I know it's hard because we also wanted ELA, math, and social studies. So I know it's hard to fit it all in, but that is important to many of us. So thank you for your efforts. I am a little surprised that it's going to take us 10 years to address the 2016 standards from the state. That feels like a long time to get to the standards. So I don't know what we can do to make that better for you and help the department, but that is something I'm thinking about. I don't have the answer, unfortunately, but I'm glad you're there helping us and moving us forward.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like, it feels like a long time for me too, because this is the thing that I care a lot about. But I also have to remind myself that there was a gap of a year where there wasn't someone for the K-8 science, and then I came on board, and right after I came on board, the pandemic hit. So there's been just some slowing down that are outside of any of our control, and we need to be thoughtful that we don't burn out our teachers by moving too quickly. So we want to move with urgency and with purposefulness, and we want to support teachers as best as possible, but we also need to do it, as Leslie was mentioning earlier about other decisions that we make. We want to do it in a way that's thoughtful, supportive of teachers, and is successful in the end. Because I could say tomorrow, here, we're going to roll out this and we're going to do it in 2 years, but we want it to not be done in a way that would end up backfiring and making it a less successful program.
And I do appreciate that. And I know that math is being rolled out in the K-5s. And so I understand it. And we're rethinking some of the ELA stuff. And so I understand that there just aren't enough minutes in the day and enough hours in the week.
Right. And if I may, just here's another weird thing about that 2016 revision. It meant a lot for us too in the high school. But a lot of the changes that the state are having, they were going to go from a paper-based test to a computer-based test, and that didn't happen because of the pandemic. So we've actually the state has had us flip-flop, I think 3 or 4 times about which of the standards we're going to be using. So this is going to be the first year that we're going to be using the computer-based test for the 2016 standards. And they just got rid of the chemistry paper-based exam for the class of 2026. So we're constantly posturing. So it seems like they made this big, huge change, but it's always a moving target.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer and then Mariah.
I'm going to be really, really quick. I just really wanted to echo, or I guess restate, when we're looking at the equity lens, I really want us to also think about female identifying students in our math and science courses, and our female identifying students of color, and like looking at both of those lenses. Just because I think it was Mariah who mentioned how discrepant it still is in the workforce and careers, and as you go up from bachelor's to grad classes. And then I actually have a request. I'm not even sure who I'm asking it to. It could be a whole slew of people. I think it's actually maybe the chair. It may be Susan. It may be a whole bunch of people at the high school. But listening to Ed talk about 22 Tappan and thinking about 9th grade physics and the cool, awesome, building that we have. We did a tour of the building when it was under construction, which was really exciting. And now that it's finished, it'd be great to request a tour of the building. I would love to go, and I'm sure lots of people would. And he mentioned a garage door, which I've heard about in my house, and the excitement about that. So I'm using this as an opportunity to sort of ask for that tour, to bubble that back up. We've talked about it before, but we haven't made it kind of concrete yet. So that'd be great.
I agree, Jennifer. We need to make that happen sooner rather than later because we're so excited about it. Mariah.
Thanks. I just wanted to follow up on the what you said, Suzanne, and I don't know if, well, I guess my question is, can we get an update on the balance of science and social studies and math and EL time in the curriculum in the lower grades at some point, please?
Sorry, I had a hard time unmuting. Absolutely. This is something that Stephen has asked about in our curriculum subcommittee meetings. And it's one of the areas that we're focusing on just in terms of getting that information for a report of findings. So yes, we can do that.
Thanks, Leslie.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. This is really helpful. I know we've been wanting this for a while, and so this is great. Emily, it's so good to have you on board. Susan?
Yeah, just to Jennifer's point, we have been trying to get that tour. We've gotten a lot of signals from the construction team that they were just sprinting to get the building ready for the 9th graders. And now that they're just trying to get the punch list cleared up, and they've had some COVID issues on the construction team. So it is still top of mind. I will raise it again tomorrow morning. We have a leadership team meeting for the high school project. So happy to raise it again. And there's just so much wonderful joy that comes out of this kind of learning. It's just exactly the kind of thing that we want excitement and joy for. It's why we built it. So yes, trying to get a way to showcase it, not only for the school committee, but also kind of photos for the community at large until the COVID restrictions lift. I just want to circle back that has been a discussion. So we'll make it happen.
Thank you, Susie. We promise to be on good behavior when we go. So thank you very much, Ed and Emily, Leslie, Janae. Thank you for this presentation. It was very helpful. I'm not signing up for any of those physics courses anytime soon, but I am glad other people are. I know, Ed, you're crushed, but I was having trouble just figuring out which courses are which. So anyway, okay, we're going to move on. You're welcome to stay as long as you want, but you're also welcome to leave and enjoy the rest of your evening and enjoy vacation week next week. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Stephen, are you ready to talk a little bit about what you're thinking on the sustainability piece? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Suzanne. I don't have too much introductory comment to make. I'll just say 3 quick things, and then maybe we can have a little discussion. One, I don't think I'm saying anything controversial when I say that climate change is the challenge of our times, and certainly of the times of the students in PSB. I was just really struck by what we have, like 8 or 9 comments of public comment today, Suzanne. And I was just thinking about how, when I was in school, there were a lot of vegetarians, and they were all for mostly like spiritual / ethical reasons. And then a couple of kids would be talking about cruelty to animals reasons. But nobody was talking. I mean, this wasn't an issue then. But now, I think I only heard that with one of the comments. All the other comments were about sustainability or about climate change. So I just want to note that. I also want to note that I think there's like a ferment around sustainability and environmental action in Brookline right now. There's the consolidation of the Climate Action Committee into the Zero Emissions Advisory Board. We have a visionary food services director. Are you still on the call? And let's see. Nope, not anymore. Well, I don't want to ruin anything, but I don't want to steal her thunder. But Sasha also seems to have be in a very late stage of receiving a grant to create a sustainability position in central administration. And we talked at a recent meeting. Sam, I think this is news to you. We talked in a recent meeting about what a job description for that position might look like. We have the sustainability policy that the subcommittee has put together. There's just a lot of energy right now from a lot of different directions to do something around environmental education, climate education, sustainability education. The last related comment is, I think this is a real opportunity for the school committee to respond to student voice, and in a really positive way. I think students are making their voices pretty clear that this is a serious consideration for them. I was really struck by that survey that Roger Grandy conducted a couple of years ago, that about 40% of students felt that climate change was negatively affecting their mental health. About 15% of them felt that it actively harmed their mental health. This is a really serious issue for students right now. So the 2-pager that I drafted and shared before this meeting, I drafted with Jennifer Monopoly as my ideal reader in mind. I'll just tell you that, Jennifer. I was thinking about how this mandate needs to be narrow and not duplicative. So there are 4 pieces of the mandate as I'm imagining it right now. One is that and the goal of all of this is to deliver recommendations to the school committee and the central administration on how we can actually move something forward that results in supporting and coordinating environmental education initiatives. But the 4 pieces of the mandate, as I imagined it, was 1, a survey, a mapping of all the assets that we have in environmental education in the town, so that we know what is it that we could support, where are there gaps. The second is to help us set goals and targets. What do we want to achieve? The third is to help determine metrics to help us understand whether we're making progress towards those goals. Come on, Mariah, stay awake on this. And then the last one is to help us consider.
Sorry, long day.
Consider strategies, investments, approaches. And this really could be a range of things. It's not just like FTE and central administration. It's also, do we want to be part of the superintendent's environmental education coalition? Like there are there are a million ways to be active in coordinating and supporting and institutionalizing environmental education initiatives in all of the domains, not just teaching and learning, but also in health and wellness and so on. So I'll stop there. And I'm interested in hearing your feedback, whether you think this mandate is narrow, viable, achievable, and not duplicative.
Just before David, do you want to just mention your vision of a panel?
Oh yeah, so I think we discussed this a bit before. It's, to me, a panel seems the most appropriate still because we need to be leveraging the expertise of the community. The only thing I'll say about the community panel, the idea is based on the expert advisory panels, but I thought we should call this a community panel for two reasons. One main reason, which is that I'm really keen on seeing if we could work out with the BEU, having teachers participate in this panel, since there's so much of this work is already coming from teachers. And I think part of, if I can imagine, I think part of the BEU's issues with the expert advisory panels is that they felt that there was external expertise was claimed as that's where the knowledge was coming from, when really the educators and administrators who have the day-to-day contact with the students, that's where the expertise really is. So I don't want to make an expertise claim. I want to make it, this is a community engagement strategy as well. It should be teachers as well as climate scientists and climate educators.
Thank you. I saw David's, was your hand up?
Yes, I'm not sure I caught the third and fourth pillars. So you mentioned mapping of assets, setting goals and targets. What are the third and fourth?
The third one was metrics for determining progress. And the fourth one is recommendations for actions. So that could be strategies, mechanisms, activities that we could undertake that would result in institutionalizing our environmental education initiatives.
And do you see this solely in education, or do you think there would be some policy implications as well?
I think there are policy implications as well. And I'm defining environmental education very, very broadly. I think I haven't wordsmithed this. It can include climate education, climate justice, sustainability education, and it's not just classroom based. It's also about food services, about operations and facilities, and health and wellness, and teaching and learning. So broadly conceived.
Val and then Mariah.
So I think it was Mariah who I had an idea that I thought was really good a couple meetings ago about the summit and making it town-wide with then a sort of sub-focus on issues that impacted the schools. And I'm wondering if that's what you're thinking about when you talk about a community panel, or if you're narrowing it to education from the outset.
I think it's certainly only in education that I'm proposing this work. I think there's plenty of town initiatives around climate action and environmental action. I think a summit as a one-time event would be less preferable because it's harder to create the outputs that I envision for this community panel, which I think would set us up to determine what kind of investment or actions we should undertake. I would imagine over a 6 to 9 month period, a community panel of students and community members will be able to help make recommendations to us about goals and targets, about ways to measure progress, and about what we can do to move us forward. Whereas the summit, I think, would be isn't that more of a one-time event?
I think they happen. They can happen, right? Multiple times and check in on your same thing, on your goals and metrics. But I was just curious on your framing of community panel.
Mariah?
I just want to confirm I heard what I think I heard, which is that you're framing environmental education, but it's not necessarily just, it's more broad than, I guess, does it include operations and facilities, or it doesn't? I'm a little vague on that.
Okay, so I would say environmental education under this panel, I'm defining as encompassing environmental, climate, and sustainability topics. The venues for environmental education, I think, are not restricted to the classroom. And so I think they if the goal is to produce students who are equipped to respond to and lead the fight against climate change, that has to also happen in their experiences with food services. That has to happen in their experiences with health and wellness education and so on. Or are you asking specifically about operations and facilities, like whether this should include green buildings?
Right, and I think you said that there's other committees or whatever looking at that, so that you would count that as out of scope. Is that accurate?
I think anything that the town is already doing, there's no value add to have a community panel do it as well.
Okay. I'm not sure that I would agree with that, but that can be an assertion. And I just forgot my second. Oh, and would they report to curriculum if it's sort of scoped within environmental education, or what would be the?
Right. So I think they need to report out to multiple subcommittees. I mean, I think, and getting to the reports, it would be helpful for them to report out and be in conversation with policy, with curriculum, possibly also with capital. But I think the report out has to be a presentation delivered to school committee and to the superintendent and deputy superintendents. That is a list of recommendations. Yeah, Helen?
Helen, yeah.
I'm wondering, would you include the town sustainability director in this panel?
Tom Barrasso? I don't think so. I mean, I think they should liaise with him and learn what it is that he knows and thinks about, but I don't think he's making recommendations specific to education, is he?
Well, he's going to, I think in terms of, maybe electric buses or things like that, certainly, yes.
Yeah, maybe in the asset mapping phase, there would be like
composting from the town, making sure DPW does that, and that we continue that program.
I think extensive consultation seems appropriate to me, rather than have him be a member of the committee, of the panel.
Would like us all working together.
Agreed. Yeah, Andy.
Andy, yeah.
Yeah, can I ask who is calling for such a panel? I understand that many people are concerned about sustainability, about climate change. Many students care about the topic. Many educators as well, but are students and educators saying what we really need is a panel whose purpose will be to help us coordinate, these scattered initiatives that are out there right now?
I would certainly not. I would say what people are calling for is meaningful action and leadership from PSB. Two, more of this kind of action, because it seems like it's disparate. They're one-off courses or magazines or summits or initiatives. And then three, ways to connect them together and support them so that they're not standalone, they're not dependent on the charisma and energy of their founder. So my proposition of a community panel to recommend to us how to better support environmental education is how I'm imagining responding to these three pieces of the same problem. Does that answer your question, Andy? I'm open to other kinds of entities. This is my best effort at what entity could be responsive and could move us forward. A working group seemed too small. Subcommittee seemed to not have a counterpart in central administration. The summit seemed like an event or too time limited. So this is where I fell. Also, I just thought the model of leveraging expertise through expert advisory panels during COVID was, I thought we proved the concept with panel 4. So I think it could be impactful. I say this as someone who was on panel 3.
Other thoughts, comments to give to Stephen? Yeah, Helen?
So in talking with our administration, what is your understanding of where they are with this?
Well, I don't want to speak for them. Dr. Gillard, do you want to say anything on this, or do you want to share your ideas on this?
I was just taking a phone call. So
Gotcha.
I think there are a number of pieces. So certainly hearing from our students, there's this desire to have a coalition around this. And so Stephen and I certainly have talked about the need of balancing what I would call initiative fatigue. There's a lot that we're working on right now all together. And so I think that's the thing that we have to be mindful of. Because the committee itself, the ideas that come out of the committee have to be implemented in action, put into action by the administration. And so I think that's where the healthy balance is. So pulling together the disparate resources that are in the community makes sense. But I think we also have to balance all of the other work that we're also looking to do in the system as well. And so it's finding that right balance of multiple initiatives, because my worry is that we'll have many great ideas spinning in the air and none of them will take root, and that will just lead to more frustration around everyone not having access or opportunity in this. And again, and also looking at what the students are also asking for as well. So there's that balance, but what experiential, and so when Stephen and I talked about this, is what experiential opportunities are in our community right now that we can get our kids connected to. To me, that seems like a great starting point. And then as we come out of the strategic planning process, as we get some of these other items moved in motion, then we can also pick up some of these other pieces as well. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, relatedly, I keep thinking back to something that we heard from educators at one of the listening sessions. I think you and I were both at this one, where, if we're going to add something, then something else needs to go, right? We can't just keep adding. And so I'm a little wary of, announcing another priority of kind of creating a new set of expectations that educators will then have to try to meet, right? Unless we also think about what to take away.
I guess I would say to that, Andy, that if the output of this community panel is a clear asset map of what we're already doing, as well as proposed strategies and/or investments and how we can do them in a more impactful way, then we can do what we want to with that recommendation. We could make the determination that it's too costly, or that there's not enough time in the day, or we could find as a result that some investments in coordination and I say this as someone who doesn't have that domain expertise, could yield results that really move existing initiatives forward. Like I'm not imagining that this panel would result in a new course, you know what I mean? Or a new mandate for teachers. It would be strategies to take what we already have and make sure that they are as impactful as they can be and that they last. Helen, did you? Oh,
No, I'm just sort of contemplating what Andy's saying, what Linus was saying, and just trying to put everything together and thinking, is this the right time? That would be my biggest concern.
I feel like what I'm hearing is concern that this is scope creep for the school committee potentially.
Well, scope creep for the staff more than the school committee.
But the panel itself wouldn't be, I don't think. I think it could produce a recommendation that a staff should do something that we could consider and accept or reject. But I don't think the panel itself would be burdensome. I guess I hear that criticism. That seems to me like legitimate criticism, but I weigh it against what seems to me this opportunity to push a critical issue forward and to have leadership around it, or to push it forward as like a point of pride for PSB, that there's coordinated action and thinking around environmental education in the district. It seems like a really positive way to engage with what PSB students are really thinking and caring about. Mariah?
On the one hand, I agree. I mean, we're just talking about the sustainability policy tonight, and what is it like, what are we doing to sort of support that and to elevate it in the same way we want to support and elevate other areas of focus. I guess I'm a little bit struggling with calling it environmental education specifically. That's what's throwing me off, I guess, is especially, you know, in the context of, you know, Andy's mentioning of if we're adding this, what are we removing? And sort of the question of what are we asking staff to do? You can't really have, as far as I can tell, an environmental education activity that doesn't directly and wholly involve the coordinators and educators. So as opposed to an like there could be a more holistic environmental recommendations group that, I don't know, it's just the idea of I just the question of using the word education sort of throws me off.
What would you replace it with? Is there a term that you think better fits what this proposal aims to be?
I'm not sure.
So Jennifer, do you have your hand up?
I don't know, I'm still really thinking about this, but I have this nagging feeling, so I'm just going to put it out there and maybe Stephen can make me feel better about it. You know, I do think that, well, right now the district, our staff, our teachers, our curriculum coordinators are working very hard on the goals that they've laid out for the year ahead, and there's a big workload. I do think that participation in any way in a panel there will be some impact on staff resources, which they're doing a lot right now. COVID has created academic and educational needs, social emotional needs. There's a lot going on right now. There is in any given year, I think. So even taking COVID out of that, I do think that people are working really hard to make progress, and we want them to make progress on those goals. And so I'm just concerned about the impact it would have on the forward progress on what has been laid out so far. And that the other piece is I do think there will be a significant expectation that we would implement the findings of the panel or whatever the committee or whatever the group would be called. I'm just wondering about that with the timing of the superintendent's strategic plan. And like, I don't know how this all fits together. Like, I don't know. So I'm still thinking. I don't have total coherent, fully formed thoughts about this. I'm still trying to figure out how I think this plays into our role and then also the impact on the district. Because I don't know, I keep saying it, like I'm really interested in this work, but I'm just trying to think about a lot of wondering.
Susan?
Okay. Sorry, my earpiece doesn't work for talking for some reason. So first of all, I could not agree more that, the environmental issue is top of mind for people and should be top of mind for us. And part of the challenge is that there are these kind of disparate conversations in lots of different silos that aren't being brought together. So I agree with that diagnosis. I think we've all been sort of experiencing that for the last number of years, and certainly the last number of months in particular. So I think that's right. One of the things in my experience, having, with both initiating the panels and sort of where they added value and where they didn't is, places where there was a very clear demand from staff were places that were easier than places where an external group sort of had ideas and sort of threw them over the transom. That didn't work as well. And so I guess my thought is that if there's a way for us to sort of observe what's out there and see like if there are interesting things that others are doing or interesting questions that others are framing, and that there is some sort of benchmarking, not as the final goal for this, but just some, kind of gathering of like cool stuff that's happening. I wonder if that would help sort of make connections with things that people are doing now and additional things that people might want to implement. And that might also put it kind of in the timeline with the, with the strategic plan next year, because it just seems that there's so many different pieces that it might take some time just to kind of wrestle them into some coherent frameworks. And if other people have done that, that might actually be a really helpful first step. And it might give sort of focus to the rest of these steps, which I think everyone sort of agrees that they make sense in the abstract. I think people are trying to figure out like how to do it and how to fit it in with where we are now. So I'm also trying to think about what are some, no regrets sort of, work that a group like this could do without taking a lot of time from staff at the very beginning, just to kind of help focus what would be most helpful and what would be a best use of time. So anyway, just a set of thoughts.
Does that sounds to me like perhaps a narrower mandate, Susan, where that's more of a focus on asset mapping to determine like what actually is happening in this town and
I think starting there, not saying that that's the end, but at least saying that that's a starting point, because it's something that I think students can, make meaningful contributions on, interviewing their peers in other districts or kind of figuring out what's going on and, pulling together. Again, I hate the word best practices, but just different ways that people are pulling all the pieces together. And then I think, just some learning sessions just to kind of wrap our head around this and then make sense of where are the places, if we have an asset map like that, or we have a landscape map also of the external world, and the idea that lots of people are doing interesting things, not in Brookline. And we can kind of put those together. That might help like give some important rifle shots for kind of places to start. And then there might be kind of momentum that comes from that, if that makes sense. But it's a building thing. Yeah. And I absolutely agree with sort of centering student voice, and in particular centering voices of people who, especially if there's, any sort of resources, if there are any ways that we can give stipends to families, perhaps of, lower income or who otherwise could not participate, that would actually be important also. So it's not only sort of experts in climate science, as you said earlier, but it's also not sort of the usual suspects of residents, because I think there's a set of perspectives that we need to actively solicit.
So it sounds to me like there are some reservations with, to say the least, with how I framed it so far, but I don't have a sense of whether you all think I should keep going with this, or should it be tabled until there's more movement until there's a different stage of Dr. Guillory's strategic planning process? Could I just hear from people as to whether they think, I guess it's hard for me to put aside the feeling that there's an opportunity here to promote leadership in environmental sustainability and climate education broadly.
Well, I like Susan's idea. If I've understood it correctly, that you start kind of with your first step and really take a picture of the landscape and see what's out there and see who's ready to participate. It may be a smaller group at first and then, a large group. Do some research and kind of do the survey of offerings in town, who are the key players, and then kind of come back and say, so this is what we have so far, and then kind of decide from there where I think things will come up in that conversation that will help what the second step will be and what the third step will be. Because I do think the students are interested in participating in, in taking a look at what we do have and maybe what other towns are doing or other districts. Yeah. Val?
I also think it's a great idea. And I want to just emphasize the point on not the usual suspects and stipends, because I think environmental justice and making sure that we're hearing all voices is going to be critical to any mapping that we're doing, landscape or otherwise.
What about the community panel as a mechanism for this? Does that sound right or wrong to people?
Jennifer?
Can you, this was a question I was going to ask, and then I wasn't sure if we were at the right spot for this level of conversation. I guess I'll just throw it out there. Is what do you mean by community panel? Like, what is the scope of like the number of people maybe that you're envisioning, right? That's just like very preliminary kind of idea. And what, so like I guess I would envision, if we're talking about getting student voice and orienting that, there are a lot of student groups across our K-8s and our high school with a very direct connection to this kind of work. And there are faculty advisors and teachers who are helping facilitate that work. There are some after school clubs. And then there's like the parent community and the larger community of the town. And so I'm just wondering what was your vision? Like, I don't know, I know where I start with it, but what do you think?
I mean, I was thinking about the expert advisory panels, about like 15, 16 people, maybe, of which like 5 or 6 are students, something like that. And there's an application process and there's some criteria for selection. I guess I would just say that the membership in the community panel is not the same as, I mean, those people would still be expected to consult with a larger group to get an understanding of who's doing what. So, I mean, that's part of, I'll just stop there. And I think any larger, it's really hard to get things done.
What about the other, if you're saying like, and I know we're just talking preliminary conversation, 5 to 6 students that would leave at least 10 other adults, what does that look like?
I think it would be a mixture of people. There would be people with demonstrated expertise and experience in the areas of climate education, climate justice, environmental education, sustainability education, those areas, but really with a focus on education, because I think there are, I mean, that to me is the value add of an entity like this, is that it would be a specific focus on how this interacts with PSB, rather than, we're not looking to create town-wide action to mitigate climate change. That's not it at all. The goal is PSB goals, to prepare our students as best we can for the world that awaits them.
How would something like Safe Routes to School play in this? Sorry, Mariah, that's probably more your alley.
I don't know.
I would just think that's an intersection of, just having been liaison with them prior, Mariah does that now, but that's a place where lots of parents are involved. It's environmentally connected, but it's also transportation. It's, I don't know. So I'm just wondering how, like, I think I'm just having some difficulty sort of wrapping my head around. It's like such a big thing. And then like we have to make, like you're talking about making it narrow, right? Because we have to have goals, but there's so many intersections, and doing the survey helps us understand what's already being offered. And that would be one of the things I would hope we would capture. So I'm just trying to figure out what, I don't know. I'm thinking out loud. I'm sorry.
No, I hear you.
So I'm going to go to Mariah and then Andy, and then we're going to wrap this up, I think, because we are over.
I'm wondering if I see it. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity, as we talk about the parallelism with the town, if you might at least go reach out to some of the people who are, and if you haven't already, which maybe you have, the zero waste people, and sort of get their input into having done this on the town side, whether it truly is an overlap to make it more expansive or not, and maybe come back and maybe they have some suggestions for their sort of best practices that they've learned of how things might be more effective. That to me would feel like a helpful next step. And then maybe also reaching out to the students, just sort of doing a little bit of that early polling of how people think it might work, and then coming back with some of that. I don't know.
Yeah, Andy?
Yeah, so I've been our liaison to panel 4. I guess I would be hesitant to generalize that experience to the kind of situation that your panel would be created to address, like where there's not such extreme operational pressure. Like I think what has made panel 4 so valuable is partly that there's been this really tight feedback loop between the operational needs of PSB, which sets a big part of their agenda. Like we face some imminent decision and we go and ask them, like, what do you think about X? And that's part of what they do. Another part of what they do is that they put things on our radar that we might otherwise not be thinking about, you know, well in advance. And so we're ready when the time comes. And so there's this, you know, partly we set their agenda and partly they set ours. And that I think has been what's made the whole thing so valuable. And so, you know, I'm having trouble. So the fact that those panels were successful in that situation, I wouldn't generalize readily to something like this, you know, where just there's not the same pressure to solve problems immediately.
I mean, you could say that about climate change more broadly, right?
Right, but the particular problem that this is meant to solve is lack of coordination among the efforts, the sort of grassroots initiatives on sustainability, like throughout the district, and that's just not something that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you that this isn't a response to pressure. To me, it's more like, how do we make something out of an opportunity? Can we create something that would result in greater impact of our environmental educational work? But I hear you. If you're saying that you don't think it'll gain traction unless it's responsive to a pressure, that seems like a totally valid criticism.
Well, Stephen, why don't, at this point, maybe why don't you think really about step 1 that you had, that goal of getting some group together, maybe not an official panel, but, you know, an invested teacher or two and some students, and start with the survey of what's out there, what's going on already, and kind of take it step by step. So I think you have a better sense of where it will go and what you can do when you get the heads together and you start talking about it.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for everyone for their feedback on this.
Okay, well, keep us updated on it. Let us know. Okay, thank you. We're going into subcommittees and liaison reports. Does anyone have anything to report? David?
So I mentioned earlier on this evening that we discussed the sustainability and pesticides policies at the policy subcommittee on Monday. In addition, we looked at an initial draft on an equity policy. This equity policy was drafted by looking at what Newton, Somerville, and a school district in Washington State have as their policies. There was also an intention to be all-inclusive in terms of not just focusing on student experiences, but also staff experiences. This was just a rough first draft. It was not put to a vote or anything along those lines, but intended to get the conversation started, because equity is clearly a very high priority of the district right now. We do not currently have an equity policy. Many other districts do. And I think it makes sense for us to move in that direction. I'm hopeful that Janae will look it over when she has the opportunity and provide a lot of suggestions and input into that. And we will continue to discuss equity at our next policy meeting.
And did you want to talk about the restraint or not? Didn't you?
Oh, yes, that's right. We also discussed the policy on restraint. There is still some division between subcommittee members and staff about how long that policy should be. The initial draft was 9 pages, very detailed, included definitions for the different terms that appear in the policy. The current draft, which is 3 pages, has hyperlinks to the current Code of Massachusetts regulations. Subcommittee members were concerned about the potential lack of transparency and relying on hyperlinks, in the sense that it's easier for many educators and stakeholders to be able to just look up a policy and understand what it actually means if it's all in one place, rather than having to rely on hyperlinks that could change over time, as well as procedures that could be promulgated by the district, but not necessarily at the same moment as a policy goes into effect. So that discussion remains ongoing. There will very likely be another draft that attempts to be a compromise between the initial longer version and the shorter version.
Thank you, David. Mariah?
I have two quick updates on the accounts payable warrants in the past 2 weeks. Andy approved 1 week and I approved the other for a total of $623,469.45. And there was nothing particularly notable in there, just the general continued expenses, a lot of food, a lot of school supplies, and some tuition, out of district tuition charges. And we moved the finance subcommittee meeting from yesterday, Wednesday, the 16th, to next Wednesday, the 23rd, same time, 5 to 7 p.m. We've also added a finance subcommittee meeting for the 2nd. And then we are keeping our finance subcommittee meeting on the 16th of March as well. So there's the next 4 Wednesdays, we have 3 finance subcommittee meetings coming up.
You're busy. Also, thank you for the work that you and Andy and Stephen did on the page on the drivers for the 23 budget. Is that posted or no?
It's not posted. We haven't discussed it yet as a committee.
Okay.
And so I didn't really know if it should be because it hasn't been discussed, because it was only drafted by 3 of us. I think we all discussed, though, that the intent was that it would go into the next version of the budget book. It did get shared with the school subcommittee of advisory, went to the select board, as everyone saw, and it got shared with the school subcommittee of advisory and also to town meeting members. So I suppose it's pretty public at this point, and maybe it just should be.
Sounds pretty public.
Yeah, so I'll maybe Sam, you and I can check and have Kiana post it tomorrow or something. Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? Jennifer?
I just wanted to give a quick update on our last curriculum subcommittee meeting, which was last Wednesday, February 9th. We had an update on the math curriculum with a focus on the math curriculum rollout. And then we also had a presentation. The district received a DESE grant to focus on social emotional learning curriculum. And so we had some information shared with us about what that will look like, the timeline, and so some of the curriculum products that they're looking at. It's exciting. And our next meeting will be Tuesday, March 15th from 4 to 6. And the last meeting was recorded if people would like to see the detailed conversation and presentations.
Thank you, Jennifer. Mariah, is your hand up again? Go ahead. That's okay.
Sorry. I wanted to also provide a quick update on the town school partnership. We met last Friday morning. And the discussion, well, I might be forgetting something. You and Helen were both there too, but I'll just say that one thing that came out of it was 2 big things. One is there was a new draft of the town school partnership memorandum of understanding that was drafted jointly with Mel and with Linus. And Cliff Brown, who's the AC schools chair, and I are supposed to work on a revised draft of that. There was discussion of that. And so we will be working on that next week or so. And the other thing was that we had a vote at Town School Partnership, a discussion and a vote of what we have all been discussing, at least at Capital Subcommittee and at Finance as well, of our commitment and support for a building department, but our ongoing confusion of the funding and the division of funding for building department activities. And so Town School Partnership took what I think was a unanimous vote, if I recall correctly, to set up a building department working group that would be joint elected officials, staff, and again, Cliff and I were going to take the first crack at laying out the structure of the committee and sort of the charge of that committee. So that's an important update. I think it'll be helpful for schools as well to get a better bead on what's going on that domain. And if I forgot anything, Suzanne or Helen, please feel free to add.
No, I just thought the Cliff Mariah group subcommittee or something. Yeah. Thank you for all that work.
They also talked about the budget and, you know, that the state aid, and I guess the MMA was critical of the governor's budget with only a 2.7% increase. Health insurance is still out there. So there's a number of factors that we've been discussing all along here in terms of our budget and where we will end up.
Yeah, and I should say just on that Mel said that he wasn't really sure how much more revenue we would get, as you said, but like it looked like maybe GIC would not be particularly favorable. But again, still as we talked about last week at our meeting, we're very early in the budget process. There's still a lot more to come on the revenue side, and Mel's comments certainly backed that up.
Sam, do you know when the GIC is decided, the increase?
Specifically, no, but my understanding from Melissa was early, they had a pretty good idea early March. But to Mariah's point, I think the town in this regards with their budget projection was fairly aggressive. And what I mean by aggressive is they projected, I think, a 5% increase, which doesn't leave a lot of favorable margin. So I would say the expectation is expectation of savings from that line would be next to nil, unfortunately.
In years past, there has been substantial savings.
Andy?
Understood, but I think they were more conservative in past years.
No, they were 5% every year.
Well, you would know better than me, but I guess we'll see. At each point, to your point, the base is 32 million or so. So every point less would be 320,000 for the town.
Right. And we're 65% of that, I think.
Andy?
Yeah, Mariah, I don't, if you're allowed to, can you say a bit more about what the motivation is for redoing the town school partnership MOA now? We were talking about this is going to be a new version of the thing that dates from like 1995.
92.
92, or I think it's
or 94. 94.
Yeah. So what is what's the reason for having a new one now?
If it's okay, I would actually punt that to Linus because he worked with Mel on the drafting of the first one. Linus, I can answer it, but your answer might be better than mine.
That's debatable. When I first arrived, Mel noted that he had been looking to update this for a number of years, and certainly with sort of our revolving door superintendents that was not able to be solidified. I think the opportunity here is that as our systems grow, our needs grow, to have some language that's a little more flexible and nimble. What is the broad scope pieces of it, and I think it is also looking to define some aspects a little bit more clearly. And so I think the draft that's out there is a starting point for discussion. And then there would be some opportunity to really nail it down to make it something that's that we can all live with. So I think where we were 20 plus years ago, 30 plus years ago at this point with that agreement, and where we are now, I think it's just a time for a refresh. So the update there. So Mariah, I punt it back to you.
The one thing that thanks, Linus. The one thing I would add is that the draft that was produced is incredibly flexible. And the comments in the meeting were that it was absent of a lot of the things that people would really care about, like the exact, formulas and timelines and, exceptions and so on and so forth. And so that's work to be done. But again, Cliff and I are going to start looking at it a little more too.
Okay, anyone else? Any new business? So it turns out we do not have a need for executive session. So I know that's always disappointing to hear, but it's true. And so this is it. We wish everyone a good break next week. I hope central office is taking some time off if they can. Linus, did you want to have a last word tonight or no?
As usual, thank you all for the lively conversation, the healthy debate back and forth. I think this form of communication is certainly helpful for the team as we tackle the work, hear the general direction of the committee. So that helps focus us as well. So I appreciate that aspect of the work. So with that, again, bid everyone a safe vacation. I was at the high school some point this week and I heard several trips to out of the country. I'll just say that I've lost all the places that I heard students say that they were going for various reasons. So there will be lots of travel taking place. So we want everyone to make sure that they're being safe so that they can all get back here February 28th, because we'll be ready to start up again.
Okay, thank you very much. And that's it. Good night, everyone. Enjoy your evening.
Good night.